Can we kindly please take up our seats? Great seeing all the people again. And actually great seeing people, real faces again. That's so nice. Welcome also to everybody on YouTube and everybody on Zoom. This is to the full sense of the word, a hybrid event. We're running on all possible platforms. And I can advise the Zoom people that you can take the Transport Forum camera and you pin that. So you right click on the Transport Forum camera and you click on pin so that you can all the time see what's happening in the auditorium. That will make it easier for you. And then the people on Zoom, we will give you later an opportunity to talk to us and to ask questions. In the meantime, you can follow. The people on YouTube, you're welcome to text questions to the panelists, and we'll also have a look at that. So that covers all the platforms. Ladies and gents, those of you who don't know me yet, my name is that guy that sends out all those bloody emails. That's my name. So thank you very much for having me in your inbox. I really appreciate that. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry does it, so I'm Harry. You know, a few years ago, I've been in a meeting here in Cape Town, and we visited the company. Let me not name the company now, but the IT manager of the company's name was Tom. And I came here with a business partner from the South African Post Office. This guy's name was Charles Dick. So I said to them, we know both Tom, Dick, and Harry in the same meeting. So hopefully a lot of money will come out of this. It's unfortunately not a bank robbery over there. So, ladies and gents, we're very much blessed today to be hosted by Cape Town Air Access. That is powered by Wesgrow. And Melissa Thaw and David King and them played a major role in putting this together. So we're really thankful for that. For the record, we're on 29th of September 2012. And the topic for today is Cape Town's potential as a leader of the South African air cargo landscape. So, Dan, if you can give me the slides, please, the program. Here we go. So, all right, so Cape Town's potential as a leader of the South African air cargo landscape. I will give the necessary people opportunity to come and speak just now and introduce. As you know, that the Transport Forum is more than 15 years old. We launched this brand in March 2007. We've been running more than 200 events, I think. And there have been more than 900, almost 1,000 presentations presented at this platform. And all those presentations are available to you for free for download. So it's one of the most powerful transport forum or transport knowledge bases that you can think of. It's all complementary. And attendance of our events obviously is complementary to everybody. So we must have somebody that's making this possible. And we obviously have valued sponsors and so on, and alliances. And I quickly want to give recognition to them, if you allow me. So today we're hosted by Cape Town Air Cargo, Air Access. David, I don't know if you want to come and say a few words about you guys now, or to do it during your presentation. Okay. Thank you. So let's give Cape Town Air Access a nice hand for hosting us today. It's great. We really appreciate that. All right, so the Transport Forum has formal alliances out of the industry, the professional bodies, and we're quickly going to look at each one of them. I don't know if some of them have representatives here in the room. You're welcome, including the sponsoring companies. You're welcome to put up your hands if you want to come and say a few words yourself. Sometimes I leave it all the hard work to myself. But okay, so we've got, first of all, the South African Express Parcel Association, the represented body and voice of the express delivery industry in South Africa. We're very thankful for Gary Marshall and team for supporting us. We've got the Road Freight Association. They are obviously the voice for the trucking industry in South Africa. I don't know if Gavin Kelly is perhaps on Zoom, but I think we will give him later on opportunity to talk. When I'm back at the desk there at the back, we'll give Gavin opportunity to talk when I'm at control board. So Road Freight Association actually joined the Transport Forum 2 months ago as a formal association. We have African Rail Industry Association, the Sarah and Flapool team, doing lots of work in actually revitalizing our rail in South Africa, rail industry. And you can see the rethinking rail and connecting Africa, and they're playing a major role in bringing in third-party access on the rail system. Obviously, a big challenge nowadays is that, yes, private industry and private operators are being allowed on the system, but only for a 2-year contract. And we would like to invest millions and billions for a 2-year contract. It's not going to work. So they're working on this to try and change this and to make it an investable proposition to investors into our rail system. And that's the hard work they're doing now. So we really appreciate what they're doing. South African Bus Operators Association. So it's the voice for the bus and coach industry, and they play a vital role in the social and economic development of our country. We know what role public transport is playing. Extremely important. So Basil Governor and team, they're also running, the AGMs and the annual conferences and so on through the Transport Forum. We had one on the 9th of June this year. It was actually our first hybrid after the pandemic, and it was quite tricky. Not to get feedback in. I can tell we've got very professional IT people here today, like what's your name? They're at the back again. Kurt at the back, and they've been helping us since about 4:30 this morning. So we're really thankful for that. Thank you very much. Right, the South African Association of Freight Forwarders, Dr. Unita Maria. You can see already established in 1921. It's the National Association of Ministry of the Republic of South Africa, the voice of the freight forwarders of our industry. And then the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport South Africa. It's a leading international professional body for everyone who works within the supply chain, logistics, and transport. So we're very proud and having SILSA on board as well. Then we also have formal media alliances with the Transport Forum. Obviously, there are many other media houses involved, but these have signed up formal agreements with the Transport Forum to be part of the brand. And there we've got Freight News, also known as Freight and Trading Weekly, became Freight News. As the Marsh family have been doing for many years good work in this country in making sure that we know about logistics and what's happening in logistics in the country. We've got a Railways Africa magazine, Philippa Dean, all about rail infrastructure. Obviously, you need to subscribe to these magazines. It will be very much worth your while. And we've got Engineering News, part of the Crema Media Group. So they premier source of real economy news. Thank you to these media alliances. Obviously, interesting enough, when we started the Transport Forum about 16 or 17 years ago already, before it became this format, the intent wasn't to do the Transport Forum as we're doing it today. The intent was to help a state-owned organization to better understand the transport industry. It was an internal focus. We started doing events every first Thursday of the month, this internal to the organization. And then other companies heard about what we're doing and they requested us, listen, can we also attend your events? And then the media started joining. And before we knew it, it was this. It just started growing and growing and growing. And so and then we decided, okay, we're doing something right. And we had the brand and the website and just developed it. And the media obviously plays a major role in giving us that exposure. So we're very thankful. Right, we've got one platinum sponsor of the Transport Forum, C-Track. It's a leading global software as a service company, a big data company for vehicle tracking, fleet management, insurance, telematics solutions. Now what can C-Track there? Yep, they're doing all the hard work. We've got University of Johannesburg, as the case with C-Track, they've been involved since the very start of the Transport Forum. Helping us. They've got a Department of Transport and Supply Chain Management. Originally, it was Prof. Jackie Walters. Today, it's Professor Nadine Pisa. Prof. Jackie is still involved. And they're obviously mentoring myself a lot to make sure that we target our sessions very much where it should be. So we're very thankful for their gold sponsorship. Pegasus, a new company who just joined myself. We just joined the Transport Forum. The Pegasus people here. You see they're hiding. Okay, Pegasus, changing lives, changing worlds. Pegasus is a multidisciplinary strategic management consulting group. They assist their clients in designing strategies, developing structures, establishing institutions, financing the systems, tasked with delivering and managing infrastructure and natural resources. We're very proud in having Pegasus as a new gold sponsor of the Transport Forum. Unitron Supply Chain Solutions. Joined Transport Forum about 2 years ago. It's a leading provider of integrated transportation, warehousing, and supply chain-based services. Thank you very much, Unitron, for your gold sponsorship. But Air Cargo plays a major role in South Africa's air cargo space. You can see it's a leading cargo airline providing express airport-to-airport solutions and related services to the courier and express logistics industry. Global Trade Solution. Marcel that just walked in. Therapy disappeared. Marcel, you want to say a few words about GTS? Yeah, at the mic. Otherwise, okay. You guys don't want to say a few words? Okay, they're going to present a little bit later on, but we really appreciate their gold sponsorship. You can see they offer customs connect and consulting services, imports, exports. You need to talk to those people, very important. All right, and then we've got the interesting Ticket Pro people. I'm going through the slide quickly. Ladies and gents, you will see they've got the online booking tool for all your corporate travel needs. It's making it much easier, much better. They search for you the best solution for you for your corporate booking, and very secure. You see it's a business guardian, making sure you protect it in the process and getting the best deal for your corporate booking. So take note of Ticket Pro Travel. All right, I see some of you are taking pictures of the screen, so we do that. Obviously, on the Transport Forum website, you can get all the links to these organizations as well. The same group, Ticket Pro, they've got the Smart Tab solution. So the system includes key features like comprehensive route management, flexible passenger payment methods, flexible route and fare product setup, shift and dispatch management, cashier system inspection tools, and comprehensive management information system reports. Great solution for buses and so on, Smart Tab for public transport. JC Auditors, compliance, so important today. They're also very much involved. You can see in the bottom left there, road transport management system. Very important today for self-regulation, making sure that what you're transporting is safe and secure. And compliance obviously is paramount. So thank you, JC Auditors, for your sponsorship. Zutari, I know there's people from Zutari here. Want to say a few words? Thank you for your support, Zutari. We really appreciate it. Consulting engineers of note, previously known as Oricon, today is Zutari. They've been gold sponsors with Transport Forum for many years. And we really appreciate Zutari. Obviously, playing a major role in mentoring myself as well, where to focus and so on. So it's great. There's Standard Bank. Kathy Bell from Standard Bank and her team, they played a major role. Also involved in the road transport management system. Standard Bank being a gold sponsor, ADOC sponsor for many years, now gold sponsor for 2 years already, if I remember correctly. And you can see, well, there's now over 159 years already of experience. So it's great having the Standard Bank brand associated with the Transport Forum. Kuba, transforming ticketing. Isaac here, Kuba. Right, it's part of the IC Mobility Group, which enables public and private transport to move into the digital area. Ticketing solutions in our buses, many of our cities are using the Kuba technology, and obviously it's an international organization. doing advanced work in terms of integrated public transport. So we're very proud in having the Kuba brand with us. Easy Clear, software solutions for custom clearing, freight forwarding, and logistic providers, covering air, sea, road, and road. Imports and exports once again. So very nice having Easy Clear on board. Thank you for your gold sponsorship. And then Kuba, Ubunya Group is Ubisili Madola, the Spot Taxi Insight. And if you want more information about the taxi industry, you can also talk to Ubisili. Link is on our Transform website. She's been involved in a group in the taxi industry for many years. So it will be good. I know they're also working on huge contracts with Gautrain and so on, and with Japan, the Transport Authority. So lots of insights there. So I would recommend you contact Lucille Majola. So they are our sponsors. Big hand to our sponsors, making everything possible for us. Just a reminder of the Transport Forum Business Directory. All of you will receive an email after this event that that will request your feedback on this event, and please do that because we need that feedback. And please advise on us what topics you would like us to present in future. We're going, especially now in the planning stages for next year's Transport Forum events. So we really ask you, please, send us your feedback. Give us the topics you recommend we should entertain us on. We really need that. And also in that email, you will receive also Olga's contact information. This is the business directory on the Transport Forum's website. Very popular. Companies are telling us they're getting huge exposure through this. And it's been outsourced as the initiative of us to the Berlin Bondtree company. And they're doing the administration for this, and all the revenue is also going to them. But it's only 450 rands per annum. So it's not much money. So you can contact Olga and she will help you to get listed in the business directory. Right. So the email you will receive after this event will include the option that you can integrate. Do you want Olga to give us a call or give you a call? So there's the website. If you want to download presentations and any content from our website, there it is. Very popular website. So if you want to download something, you go to the left of the website screen. You'll get the username and password where you should log in. If you haven't got an account yet, then you should actually go and select sign up. And you go through a simple little registration process, confirming your email, that usual stuff. And then once you've logged in, then you can download presentations. And that's the deal. Okay. So you don't pay to attend the Transport Forum events, but we gather your information to keep you posted on what we are doing. So that's the deal. Rail transaction. Okay. And that's where it comes in, that guy that sends out all these emails. So we've got a proper copy policy on our web if you want to read it. We're stating all of that there. How we gather information, what we do with the information, and so on the website. All right, so once you've logged in, you can go to events, you select downloads, and once you've done that, it gives you a little simple little search engine. The search engine will give you opportunity then to search in the top field. You can go and select a person's name or a topic or whatever, and you hit search, and it will search through all 900 presentations of history and give you everything that you've just searched. Very powerful. You can go to the top, the bottom field category, and you can select the event's date. It'll bring up all the presentations of that day when you would search. So it's simple but very powerful little search engine. All right, so that brings us back to our program. And like we're not doing too bad on time. Important, you can see at the bottom there of the program, the last thing on the program is lucky draws. So that's actually a very important feature in our program. All right. But the winners must be present. So that's the carrot for you to stay to the end. I know the presentation is going to be good, but you have to stay to the end to be able to be part of the lucky draw. So there are many, well, two nice lucky draws. And we obviously got gifts well presented as well. And it's nice lucky draws. The one lucky draw was actually a bottle machine. What's that? So there you go. It's on the camera. So obviously only we can do that with the people being present. True South African fashion. Right. So ladies and gents, I think we should move over to Mr. Joshua Farm, our first presenter of today. And he's going to set the scene, the Western Cape's trade profile. Thank you very much, Joshua.
Quite short because then Mr. King's going to join and he's very tall, so then he's got to lift the mic up again. So yes, thank you very much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And I would just like to ask if the presentation can be shared from the side, just so that we can get the ball rolling on that. But yes, welcome. And I'm from Western. My name's Joshua. I actually focus on trading services. But prior to that, along with the Western crew, I was focusing on the EU desk, many different product categories, and as well as the trade profile of the Western Cape and a lot of the research work. So it's an excellent pleasure that I have here today to actually display a few of our key export stats, just to put the environment into the scene. And so we can also use that as a few deductions moving forward today. So I'm going to start very easily from our top overview through to our top markets, our Western Cape export and import basket, and then a few priority sectors, markets, and then closing remarks. I'm going to be a bit cheeky and throw in a few extra slides. Not too much. I'll try not to bore you with too many stats, but you'll see as I move forward. So let's start off quite easy, and that's basically our exports accelerate in 2021, plus 22%, despite the global economic challenges. And I think everybody, when they think of COVID, they think, oh, but our trade should have done so poorly. But in actual fact is the pandemic also highlighted a lot of opportunities for different products once you obviously got over the major hurdles of goods moving through and out of different ports at the time. So we saw a massive boom in citrus fruit, for example. I think COVID was a catalyst for the citrus fruit industry. And, you know, on the other spectrum, it was quite devastating towards our wine industry as well. So it was a give and take. And you can actually see from this graphical representation I have here on the board, you'll see that our export balance from 2019 to 2021 actually rose slightly. So it actually maintained quite a steady equilibrium. But we do operate at quite a deficit at the moment between our imports and our exports as of 2021. Obviously, we've had a lot of supplementation in the markets of other produce and other products coming in. But for me, a healthy trade balance is not only minimizing the export and the import so that obviously it's on a more equal level, but both of these have to increase to create a greater economy of trade. I think a lot of people underestimate it. So seeing that imports is rising quite heavily isn't just indicative of a negative experience for the trade economy, but this is also a positive indicator that perhaps maybe our exports can grow and we're importing raw materials for value addition. So there's always a positive side to that. And now, just to segment it further, these are our largest markets at the moment. So you'll see, yes, I'm a weather person. As you can see, Europe's got a swell. And as you can see, Africa's got some heavy rainfall at the moment. But you'll see Europe is our biggest trading partner at the moment. This includes the UK currently, just because in terms of trade stats, it's just still easier to clump them together. But just to also put that into perspective, that we do also tally the UK separately from the EU now, but for this certain example, we've just included them. Africa used to be our largest trading partner and also had the highest growth potential, still does. The reason for such a decline, especially over the past 2-3 years, was because of petroleum oils. So we actually saw that massive decline in Africa, but we expect over the next 3 to 5 years for the Africa market to well overtake the EU market due to the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. This is probably the biggest opportunity for South Africa and Africa in terms of trade, and definitely in terms of air cargo, logistics, ports, transport, whatever it is. Africa needs that infrastructure in order to execute and effectively utilize our Africa trade agreements. Without that, it's all bust. It doesn't matter how many countries ratify, no matter what negotiations occur, if we don't have that infrastructure, it's not going to work. So it's a great opportunity, especially in this room, to look at Africa as a prime example market for growth, especially in logistics, transport, travel, etc. Asian Americas, obviously not as large as our EU and Africa. Asia, they're growing, but they do have the highest growth potential for the Western Cape. And this is simply because you've seen massive demands from Americas, and I'll get to that now. And of course, Asia is always a growing powerhouse market that we cannot ignore. So they've got a great growth potential. Africa to be rising. For the EU, again, biggest trading partner, so we need to hold a strong brand positioning over it and continue our massive export deals into the region itself. And now let's break it down even further and look at the top markets. And like I said previously with Americas, you'll see our USA is currently our largest trading partner. Our trade just completely exploded with the USA over the past year or so. And we actually attribute this to a few things in particular. So first and foremost, I think we all know AGOA, trade agreement that we have with America. So that is actually ending. I shouldn't say ending, but the likelihood of it being renewed is quite low. So I think that there's a lot of businesses pushing as much as they can into the USA to maintain a position there, so that when the agreement does eventually fall away, and it will eventually fall away, they at least have some protection in the market and access to the market. From there, you'll see the Netherlands at number 2, but that's not actually the Netherlands. Because of the port in the Netherlands, it is probably the central point for all goods coming into the EU and then being distributed outwards. So all of that produce, manufactured goods, raw materials isn't actually designated for the Netherlands. I don't know why I'm telling you guys. We all know this already. But obviously, Netherlands is not really number 2, but is also number 2. So it's quite difficult for us to track and see where those goods are coming from. Another big port that's actually quite throwing our date off at the moment is the port of Antwerp. Actually, our premier is going there for a delegation just to foster greater business linkages, and also think in direction to air access and the direct link to Belgium. But the port of Antwerp as well has also been quite a central hub in the Europe as well. So those are 2 massive ones, and then followed then by the UK, then by Namibia, our largest SADC partner for trade, then China, which will always be a rising star there in terms of trade itself, and then finally Botswana, moving through to Germany, India, UAE, and then finally Lesotho. So let's talk about our import products, and I just want to bring your attention to a few years. So obviously our biggest import products, petroleum, refined petroleum oils will always be, and crude oil will always be on top, followed then by rice of grains, telephone sets, parts of electrical machinery, men's boy suits, footwear, fish frozen. A lot of people also wonder, but we've got a great fishing industry that we do. But remember, the export net that we get from our fishing industry is greater than our domestic selling of our fisheries. So that's why we import a lot, simply because from an economic point of view, it's bigger bang for the buck exporting our fish itself. That's why we do import quite a fair share. We've also got transistors and T-shirts as well. So a lot of textiles, value-added goods. And I want to contrast this with our top export products. Citrus fruit, wine of fresh grapes, crude oil, grapes, apples, flat roll products of iron, non-alloy steel, massive product in the States at the moment, edible fruits, fruit juices, and apricots. What's the difference between our export and our import products is this simply. If we look back at the previous slide, look at all of these well-manufactured value-added goods compared to a lot of our raw materials. Citrus fruit is going into markets. These aren't just people buying oranges, lemons, citrus. It's being turned into juice. It's being used in other products. So we need to step up and also add that value and sell that finished product, because that just is a better value chain for our economy in general. And it is a better push to get those products into market, so that we also don't have to rely on raw materials alone. We also create more jobs too. So as much as this is quite an agri-heavy basket, we also need to look at how do we increase our end-of-line finished products. And then I have to mention agriculture because we actually export 55% of South Africa's export basket for agri centrally here from the Western Cape. So we're massive. Obviously, our wines incredibly popular. I mean, we export 95% of Africa wines. This is the Western Cape specifically. 7th in the world's wine production, as well as 4% of the world's wine production in the world. We also have massive shares into beverages, meat, fish, fruit, fishing products, general agriculture, and we've got the fastest growth rate in Africa for our agri exports as well. So it is quite a massive sector in general. But also just to put this into perspective and maybe also to put the marketing opportunity for myself and my desk at Wesco, as massive as our export industry is, it does not come close to services within the Western Cape. So services being also what all of you offer, and as well as any intangible products and value addition on the chain of exports. So as massive as our agri powerhouse is, our trading services is probably our biggest backbone of our economy. So we also need to look to how do we translate to agriculture trading services, not just our tangible products itself. But it's an interesting thought. This is our core function here at Wesco. And I just wanted to maybe give you some background to what we do before I go on to what we've identified over the past few years. And that basically is we just hope to promote the goods, export goods and services of the Western Cape globally, attract and go outwards for foreign direct investment and develop exporters. This is our chief mandated goal, as well as we work and get funded closely by DDAT, and Mr. Dengani is here with us, and we work very closely with him too. And we just hope to promote the Western Cape as a source destination market. So I wanted to cover a few sectors and then I'll be done, and a few markets. And obviously agriculture, agri-processing will be at the top, followed then by manufacturing and value-added products, boat building, machinery, fertilizers, cosmetics, wine, jewelry, food products. Services, we've got quite a long list, but we will also be breaking that down to our biggest and low-hanging fruit. Transport services have and freight and logistics have been identified as services in terms of potential external markets. How can we actually enter into different, cater for those portfolios into Africa, into the EU, etc. And of course, our overarching ones, which is natural ingredients, green industries, halal, and tech as well, which needs to be there. And then lastly, in terms of our priority markets, we've had to split it up into tier 1 and tier 2. So what we did was we actually highlighted our top 80 HS coded products within the Western Cape. And we've identified all the key businesses. We've liaised directly with them. We've built all profiles based on those HS codes. And this is our completed list that we've created in terms of priority markets coming from export councils, associations, our top 200 businesses. So we're quite confident in saying these are our priority markets at Wesco. And this is obviously we split it into two. So you'll see in tier 1, it is a lot of our established traders that we have already, mainly because from a positioning point of view, we need to retain that. So it is quite important for our tier 1 markets, especially in the aftermath of COVID. And in tier 2, we've got our high growth markets. And we've also made this decision based on market access. So these are probably some of the friendliest markets to enter. I shouldn't say friendliest, be a bit more diplomatic than that. But these are probably the most ease of access into these markets. So, and this is coming from a lot of our exporters as well. So our tier 2, we're focusing on growth and promotion, and tier 1, we're focusing on retention. And then finally, just to promote one last thing, and this is our Cape Trade portal. We actually have an online portal which we hope to connect with several different markets and also promote the Western Cape's export and services offering. And through this, we're hoping to kind of bridge the gap between our in-person trade promotion and our virtual segments that we work with to create a hybrid format. So please check out the Cape Trade portal, list yourself, more than happy to connect with me or one of the colleagues from Wesco, and they can guide you with that particular segment. But thank you very much. That'll be all from me. And yes, please have a lovely day, and I will be available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joshua, for a very interesting presentation and setting the stage for us. We really appreciate that. Ladies and gents, we're doing very well on time. Joshua, will you be available later on today for the questions and answer session? Would you then? But could you now take a few questions in? We're running out of time. So if you can come to the front, we'll appreciate it. All right. So ladies and gents, you're welcome to raise your hand. We take questions in the audience. I'll bring the microphone to you. We must talk on the mic, otherwise people on Zoom and YouTube can't hear you. So I'll bring the microphone to you. You'll ask your question, and then I'll go to the Zoom workstation at the back, and we'll see if there's anybody on Zoom who wants to ask a question. So can I have hands for questions, please?
Yes, sir.
There's one, two, one, two. Kindly identify yourself, ask a question.
Hi, my name is Anton. I just wanted to-
GTS.
yes, from GTS, yeah. So I wanted to find out on all the stats that you presented, I see sort of South America is quite absent from that. And given that the Mercosur trade agreement was signed quite some time ago, what do you sort of see as the sort of impediments of growth into those markets and any insights into that? Thank you.
I think, it's also the same issue. Well, I should be more diplomatic. There is a high cost of doing business in Africa, and that's just from a security and risk point of view, and also logistics point of view. So there's a high trading cost, and the same goes for South America as well. You've got a lot of exporters also from our larger down to our SMEs that have all said that the cost of doing business in South America is incredibly high, and for the amount of trade deals that they're getting, it's not worth. They don't see it as worth it. It actually uses more operational resources as it should. So it's more of a private-led decision as opposed to us pushing any narrative against it. So we kind of follow our exporters and the companies, organizations we work with. So there's not a lot of activity in South America. Also, if you look at Brazil, there's actually a lot that we mirror in terms of our economy with Brazil and the rest of South America. They're actually more competitors than they are trading partners. Chile, I love the Chile Trade Promotion Agency. It's probably the best operating one in the world. They're excellent at it. They are competitors to us. Their wines are competitors to us. Their fresh produce are competitors. They manufacture the same goods. They even have the same challenges as us. So that's why South America is not maybe the biggest highlight, but we are still receptive of their growth potential. I don't think we ignore it. So they've got a high growth threshold, and I think they will definitely grow within the next 5-10 years. But I think also it's government to government that needs to also have those open discussions with trade agreements. Mercosur, fantastic agreement, but the products that have the tariff, the zero tariffs to Mercosur is they don't really match our priority sectors, and they don't also match also a lot of the industries that we have here that make the biggest impact. I think that's just how the negotiations went. So it's very hard, for instance, to find a fertilizer producer that they can go into South America through Mercosur, and then they still have high operating costs because they're entering into the market. So how do they balance that? So they say it's not worth it. So again, it's also a conversation that needs to be had about agreements. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Here's two questions. Let's take that one first.
Thank you very much. This is Farai from WWF. I just wanted to know if you have a sense of the split between the mode of transport for exports, shipping and aviation. Could you please shed some light on that? Thanks.
Oh, you're putting me on the spot there. It is quite a difficult thing for us to track because it is quite an intensive research process. And also I think it's a relationship process as well. You need to be connected to the right individuals that are keeping track of your different modes of cargo. So whether it's by port, road, whether it's air cargo. So I unfortunately do not have those stats to the T, but I can actually maybe provide what our biggest exporters have stated. Ports are the number one mode of travel for most products going back and forth. Air cargo is again shared with, a lot of people, the costs of air cargo are quite high. So you get very niche products using air cargo, or actually cargo that's got a very fragile, perishable chain to it. So they'll use air cargo instead. And of course, road freighting is a good one without trucks, South Africa freight, or, and the road freighting will always be the connecting point between also air cargo and ports itself. I don't have those stats, but
Joshua, I
again,
can save you there.
okay, thank you, thank you. After you, please. You should actually ask it more to David. He probably knows more than me.
Well, we can just give the answer. So we mirror the world average in that sense. So air cargo is only responsible for about 1% of volume in the world, but it's responsible for 40% of the value. So it's a massive industry in terms of value, but in terms of volume, very small. It's high value. Low volume. High value.
Nikki Fassman from the city of Cape Town, and I'm learning, so this could be a silly question, but you mentioned that the exports include services as
Yes.
well. And I'm interested to know, how do you measure that value? And with that, then the services which are provided digitally and so the mode of transport.
Actually, there are 4 modes of transport for trading services, and this is identified by the WTO. Now, I must just get myself here. So you got the movement of persons, cross-border supply, OFDI, which basically where you set up a certain facility in markets, so there's an investment linkage there. And then finally, your last mode, but it's quite not unknown, but incredibly small in terms of how people operate. You actually operated with a transfer of IP. So it's your intellectual property side. That's very prevalent in trading services. So the trading services where it become more prevalent is in the OFDI opportunity, where you go into market, say Germany, you set up an establishment there, but then obviously what you're servicing, that money is coming back to South Africa. Then it's not an investment, just out of investment, but it's also coming back too. And then cross-border, that will be your digital. That will be you going into markets. That will be the movement of persons as well. So those two work very closely in the chain. But the important thing with trade and service to always keep in mind is it always has to come back to South Africa. It's anything intangible where you're going into market, you're offering that service, but then that pipeline is strictly coming back into our economy itself. If it doesn't, then that's an outward foreign direct investment, and that is all investment led into a different market for company growth. But it's quite a complicated one because there's no database in the world that's going to give you trading services data to a very good PS physical products. Not even the WTO can have that because it's so difficult to track. There is one way to track it, but you need actually a lot of facilitation between the SA Reserve Bank, SARS, and tracking of foreign currency as well. So it is quite a challenge, but we take a lot of lead from industry. These different services done for us.
Right, thank you, Josh, at this point. Let me just ask the people on Zoom whether you can raise your hand should you want to ask a question. Raise your hand, or you can unmute yourself, then we will pick up that you want to ask a question. Doesn't seem to me there's anybody on Zoom who want to ask a question. All right, no one ask questions on the stage, so we can continue. Let's give a hand to Joshua. Thank you very much. Great, ladies and gents, very interesting presentation. Thank you very much, Joshua. We're still talking about Cape Town's potential as a leader of the South African air cargo landscape. And the next presenter will be Mr. David King. He's the project manager for Cape Town Air Access. He's going to talk about the air cargo landscape in the Western Cape. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Harry. Hi, everyone. It's a nice, personal setting. This I like it. The setup here. So, thank you for coming out and thank you for attending our event today. We really appreciate it, and I would like to share some interesting, points on air cargo. But before I get there, I just want to do a quick introduction on Cape Town Air Access for those of you that don't know us. As Harry said, we are part of Westgrow, and we are a strategic project housed within Westgrow. But we have 5 other partners that also contribute to our project. We were started in 2015 with the express goal of getting more direct international flights flying into Cape Town. And the project has grown since then. We are involved in a few other things as well now, but this was our mandate at the start. And the partners that assist us with this is the Western Cape government, the City of Cape Town. We've got the airports company, a very important partner, obviously. That's where the flights arrive. And then we also have 2 tourism partners. We've got Cape Town Tourism and we've got South African Tourism that forms part of our project. And all of these partners contribute, in a strategic way in guiding the project, but also financially in assisting us to reach our goals throughout the year. What makes the project interesting for us as well is we've got private sector involvement, and these companies based in the Western Cape, really believe that air access is key to improving economic competitiveness for the region. So after COVID, we've lost some of our partners, but at the moment we've got Investec as one of our main partners. We've got the V&A Waterfront, the biggest tourism destination, I think, in Africa. And then DHL, we've got some people from DHL here as well. Captain sitting there. So DHL came on board 2 years ago, and this was basically because we saw that air cargo was becoming much more important in terms of servicing the Western Cape and also creating some of the benefit that we see, for airlines. So, we value the partnership with DHL very much, and we hope to continue that going forward. Thanks for your support as well. So that's just a quick background. Then I just want to talk a bit about the aviation recovery. Some of you might not have seen this or know about it, but we're doing, quite well in terms of our recovery at the moment. Domestically, we saw a bit of a drop down when Kalula and Comair and British Airways went out of the market. So since June, we saw a bit of a drop, but that obviously increased load factors a lot, and all of you probably know what the flight prices are right now. So we're also working with the domestic airlines to try and get more capacity into the market. Internationally, it's going very well. For the year to date, we've seen about a 65% recovery in international traffic. And this is just going to increase going forward. And then also for air cargo, we're almost at an 80% recovery already. So getting close to 2019 levels. This is obviously compared to 2019. And then one of our key slides that we always show is the upcoming summer season and what's expected and who's flying into Cape Town currently. And this, for us is, it's just amazing to see that all the airlines put their trust back in the destination, and all the direct flights that are coming in. So, I'm not going to go through all of them. As Harry said, this will be available, but some of the key highlights that we have is Air Mauritius returning in November. For the outbound market, that's a big one. A lot of people, and you'll also see in the air cargo section, I will refer back to that. Then we also have, KLM increasing to 10 flights a week. We've got British Airways coming back with a twice daily flight, and they're going to start with 3 times a week Gatwick flight again. Virgin will enter the market. They were planning to do it. They had 2 flights, and then COVID, which one was that? Delta variant hit us, so they had to stop the flight. So they will be finally returning on the 5th of November. We recently welcomed Air Belgium. They arrived on the 15th of September. here in Cape Town, and that was one of our biggest unserved markets, Brussels. So we're very glad with that service as well. And then also North America, there will be a lot more connections to North America coming up. We already have New York operated by United Airlines, but they will add Washington. And then we also have Delta Airlines that will fly from Atlanta with a daily flight from September to December onwards. So yeah, really looking forward to a bumper season, and we hope, that this will, continue into the new year as well. And we'll, see many more tourists coming into Cape Town soon. So yeah, as I mentioned there, 4 new routes, 3 new airlines entering the destination. So we've done some calculations, and it looks like we'll, for the period November to March, reach about a 93% recovery compared to 2019. That's 1.5 million seats coming into the destination. In terms of air cargo, we'll be just under 90% recovery for the same period and about 60,000 tons capacity. So really a good season that we're looking forward to. This will be our route network from November onwards. And as you can see, some good connections to Europe, to North America, and then even to Africa, which has been one of our key focus areas for the past few years. There are obviously some gaps that we're working on. As you can see to the east, we still lacking some connectivity to the east with only Singapore Airlines operating. We're working on Australia as one of our top destinations that we targeting, and then West Africa for us also a big opportunity. No direct connections there. A lot of business, a lot of trade happening there, and then South America, which we just discussed, and that's probably one of the reasons as well that there's not a lot of connectivity to South America, and that's also hampering the trade and development of that destination quite a lot. I mean, at the moment there's no flights between South America and South Africa even. They're not flying. There's no one flying into Joburg as well. So that's a big target market for us. So getting to the air cargo, some more stats that you can read at your leisure at a later time. But as I said, we're seeing about an 80% recovery year to date, and exports and imports are tracking each other quite nicely. The recovery is quite similar, and different to the surface more shipping trade. It's quite even in terms of exports and imports on the air cargo front. The only difference here is that it's very seasonal, where your exports, comes in at a different time to your imports. Imports is more from November onwards, when we going into the Christmas season, where your exports and fruit and flowers and everything is more during the winter months. So quite an interesting profile, and that's where the airlines sometimes struggle to balance the loads, and which makes it a difficult destination to manage in that sense. I'm sure, that we're trying to work on that, but it's a difficult thing to solve. And then in terms of the trade by continent, you can look at it there, and you can see that we're seeing some good recovery, but then Africa is really, really struggling at the moment in terms of the recovery. We only have a 20% recovery compared to 2019, and that is mainly due to Mauritius. We haven't had any flights to Mauritius now for quite a while. I think, when did Joburg start with the Mauritius flights again? Yeah, beginning of the year. So, and that was one of our top markets. If you look at that, at the moment, we only have about 1,200 tons, and the trade between the Western Cape and Mauritius was about 5,000 tons in 2019. So there's a big gap there, and at the moment Mauritius only has a 6% recovery compared to 2019. So I think when that comes back online, I think that will improve the situation quite significantly. And then also the other island, Madagascar, is also not on the map currently, with only a 25% recovery, and that was also in the top 12 in 2019. So looking at the countries, our top countries, I've listed it, and then I've also listed the 2019 position, so you can see who's improved and who's fallen off. And yeah, as I said, Mauritius was number 3, and they're not even in the top 100 currently. So the Netherlands replaced the UK as the top destination for us in terms of air cargo trade. And this is based on volume now, not value. So it's a bit different to what Joshua presented. He was focusing on the value, and this is all volume related now in terms of tons transported. So Netherlands first, and then the UK, and then it follows one of the interesting ones, Qatar. They jumped from 47 to number 5 now. And I haven't done a lot of research about that, but it could be related to the World Cup and with preparations there going on. And we also had a lot of flights throughout COVID from Qatar, which just created the capacity. So that's quite an interesting one. And then also Vietnam jumped quite significantly. And you can interrogate this further at your leisure. Then in terms of our products, also a very interesting picture created. Food makes up about 80% of our exported products by air. And this is now for the first 7 months of the year, so year to date. So food, and I know the top product is actually blueberries. So this is quite an interesting picture to have in terms of what we are reliant on in the Western Cape in terms of our air cargo exports. Other things are perfume and colors and dyes, but food makes up obviously most of that products being exported. And this is one of the key things that we are also focused on is in the Western Cape with, so many perishables going out of here. We really need to look at, the infrastructure around our perishable sector and how we can support that and make that, work in a more efficient way. We're promoting, some kind of perishable center where, perishables export center where people can bring their products, especially small, medium businesses that doesn't have access to the big players that can't afford to use those markets to have a certain place where they can come, a central place, and export their products. And then on the import side, much more even distribution. The top product is clothing and accessories that we import, followed by foodstuffs as well, fresh food, and then pharmaceuticals also play a big part in the Western Cape ecosystem. And there's also a big drive to improve the health tech sector in the Western Cape and make that a priority sector, especially in Westgrove as well. So yeah, I've just given a short overview of some of the data. We have access to quite a lot of trade data in terms of air cargo. We've subscribed to a service called Seabury, one of the top data sources in the world. And that was, up to now, one of our biggest challenges was to get reliable data in terms of air cargo movements around the world. The one gap that we still have is on the domestic side. Domestic, it's very difficult to track, especially on a product level, what moves in terms of air cargo. So that's also something that we're trying to focus on. So the role that we see ourselves playing as Cape Town Air Access and Westgrove is, the problem statement revolves around the reliance on belly cargo at Cape Town International Airport. And the biggest example of that is when COVID hit, all the flights stopped, all trade by air cargo stopped dead because we didn't have any freighters coming into Cape Town. So everything had to be trucked up to Joburg. And the problem now is to change people's perceptions again, or change people's, current operations is very difficult because they got used to that now and they're just continuing. So we're trying to promote Cape Town and the Western Cape as an international gateway for air cargo and for passengers. And, this is all in terms of promoting job creation and the economy in South Africa. So although we focused on the Western Cape, we believe that it will, benefit the whole of South Africa. So our main goals are, to grow passengers and air freight into the destination, to focus on supply side interventions that include infrastructure expansion and development. And Westgrove is not, we won't build the infrastructure, but we will promote and we will assist, infrastructure service providers like, the airport and the city and the province to, to grow the air cargo sector. And then also assisting and helping with the planning of the whole Electropolis development in the Western Cape. So we did a bit of a analysis a while back, and we looked at what's the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats for the Western Cape in terms of air cargo. And some of the strengths that we identified is the location within the city, the availability of land. There's a lot of suitable industries with air cargo potential. We're expanding the international connectivity, opening up new markets, which will assist a lot. And then Cape Town is one of the leaders in e-commerce on the continent, or it's probably the leader in e-commerce on the continent. And it's all of these new industries coming into the destination that's assisting the air cargo story as well. IT, someone mentioned that we're the Silicon Valley of Africa. I don't know if we're right there yet, but we're working in that direction. So all of that will assist the air cargo story. We've got some weaknesses, like I said, limited cargo data sources. We've got infrastructure constraints on the air and land side. We've got a heavy reliance on the belly freight. There's no, in the destination, unfortunately, there's no active marketing or awareness that we're an air cargo marketplace. So people are not aware that, that they can fly here, that they can bring their products here. And then there's disjointed planning and policy ideologies. That's not just in the Western Cape, that's right across the country. Our opportunities is the greening of air cargo, Africa's potential in terms of SARTM and the Africa Free Trade Agreement, the growth and potential of e-commerce, the potential for perishables, and then partnerships with established cargo companies operating in Cape Town and the Western Cape. We have some threats, and obviously coming to mind is the energy shortcomings at the moment, safety and security. This is, my well, not my personal opinion, but you can differ with me, but regression and weakness of national policy and direction in terms of cargo and logistics. And there's also limited investment in new technologies. It's some of the things that we operate are from the 60s and 70s. So and then obviously for the Western Cape, the big one is also there's always tension between national and local government. So what is vital for air cargo development here is the recovery of many of the airlines in the short term was dependent on the air cargo volumes that they could transport, while the passenger volumes were very low. And that is still the case with some airlines, although we see passenger volumes now really picking up. And like Junaid said, actually they're struggling to put cargo on some of the planes because there's too many passengers. So that also talks again about the belly capacity and having maybe some kind of dedicated freighter options. In the longer term, we will have a stronger air cargo offering with all the carrier choices that will be in the market. And this will obviously also be attractive for the business cases to attract more airlines. So it's almost like chicken and egg. If you have more, then more will come. So, and then if we target the air cargo development for the Western Cape, it will obviously provide more export and import offerings and more opportunities to enter the global market as well for companies. And if we focus our interventions now, it will ensure that we have the infrastructure going into the future on the air side and land side to meet our growth needs. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, David. You will be available for the panel discussion. So let's keep David there. Thank you very much, David. Impressive work you guys are doing, and it's encouraging. I've learned from people like yourselves that if there's not a demand, it doesn't help you develop an airport or a port or a marine port. The demand must be there and the capacity must be there. So obviously the work you guys are doing is much wider than we can think, and we appreciate what you've been doing and telling us, David. And looking forward to having the panel discussion with you later on. All right, looking at our program. Can I get our program, Jan? Thank you. Right, ladies and gents, we're still talking about Cape Town's potential as a leader of the South African air cargo landscape. And our next presenter then will be Mr. Ulisa Nwawuti. And he's the Assistant General Manager of Cape Town International Airport. And he's going to talk about Airports Company South Africa's air cargo strategy overview. Thank you very much, Ulisa. We appreciate you being with us today and sharing some knowledge with us. Thank you very much. No, where's this one?
Good morning, everyone. Yes, okay. I know what's on your mind. You have two questions. Is his name Yolisa? But he's a man. So yeah, we do come in this form as well as Yolisas. Like Harry said, I work for the airport, Cape Town International Airport. Currently, I'm working in the capacity of Assistant General Manager, Client and Passenger Services, Commercial and Regional Integration. There's going to be some alignment between my presentation and David's presentation and the speaker before David, because we are all talking about the same thing. So what I will do is I won't bore you by repeating a lot of that, but I will just show the slide and mention a few things about the slides. Thank you. So the plan for today is for me to just take you through the passenger volumes. As mentioned before, the bulk of our cargo moves through the belly of the aircraft. So passenger volumes are important to us. We will also go into some cargo analysis, even though David has done a bit of that, but what I think will be different with mine just a little bit, I will take a look at the whole of the AXA network, and then I will zoom into Cape Town. I will talk a bit about some initiatives that we are still working on, just to share with you how we are planning to support and grow cargo as an airport. I will touch on the Electropolis, as this is a big part in growing the economy. And then I will talk about available opportunities in Cape Town. Passenger volumes. Sorry. Passenger volumes, I'm just taking you from May up until August. And as it was shared, currently our recovery is at 67%. Load factors are good at about 80–90%. And we noticed that from May, our recovery was higher, and that's when we lost ComAir. And also we know, I think in June, July, the interest rates also went up. So it's a different climate at the moment. But currently we're going back up. We're at 67% for domestic. International, currently for the month of August, our recovery is at 87%, and our load factors are also at about 80%. The current airlines that are operating in Cape Town at the moment, in domestic, it's Airlink, FlySurf, ASM Air, Lift, and SAA is back. And the airlines that are not operating would be Mango, British Airways, Domestic, Kulula, and SA Express. On the international side, I think I won't go through the whole list. We'll just say, show you the list of those that have returned, and we have soon to return, like Air France, and also starting that would be Delta with a new route, and also Virgin returning. So those are important to us because most of our cargo is moved by international flights. for international aircrafts. Going now a bit into our cargo analysis. In our cargo analysis, as it was mentioned, that most of our cargo, in fact, we are at 90% recovery of our 2019 numbers. And the AXA network outbound, we have recovered 93% and inbound 88%. And as the AXA network, it is similar to what was presented in terms of Cape Town, to say that the inbound is more than the outbound. And this is consistent, as we can see here from 2017 up until 2022, but we see a slight improvement from 2021 to 2022. This is just a bit of a breakdown, cargo markets by region. As it was mentioned, Europe is it takes the bulk of our cargo. And I just wanted to also show that you can see the difference between the inbound and the outbound for that period. And you see what is different is Africa. We tend to send out more cargo into Africa than to us. And I'm sure that was explained. It's about infrastructure. It's about all these other challenges. They need more from us than maybe they can send to us at the moment. And there's a further breakdown there per airport. You can see how much in terms of weight, 71 million kilograms out of Cape Town, into, in fact, Otia, and about 7 into Cape Town. So this just shows you that the bulk of our air cargo as a network is mostly going through Otia. You can go through that or in your leisure as well. It was mentioned earlier which commodities are traded, and this is based on value. This is inbound, so mostly inbound, and this is for Cape Town. Mostly inbound, it's cell phones, it's computers, pharmaceutical products, medical equipment, and vehicle components, catalytic converters, they call them. And the countries specifically that are sending this to us, this type of cargo to us, is Netherlands, Germany, United States, and the UK. Going to outbound now, out of Cape Town. Outbound out of Cape Town, based on trade value, not volume this time. I think you showed us based on volume, based on trade value. It's jewelry, it's precious metals, it's computers, fish, fresh produce, and cell phones as well. And the countries that we trade with the most would be Netherlands, Qatar, Germany, Spain, and United States. I want to touch now on the Electropolis. The Electropolis is it's an idea where the airport is the center of the development in an area. So the airport would be at the center, and then around the airport there would be development. So the development that is next to the fence of the airport, and this would happen in smaller airports like the local airports and the regional airports. Then you call it an airport city because it's just a small development closer, is close in proximity to the airport. That would be an airport city. Where we would want to be as an international airport in Cape Town is to be an Electropolis, where the development goes further than just the close proximity of the airport, and that would involve corridors in terms of transport, modes of transport in and out, and ease, and also development of industries that are related to the airport. And further than that would be a smart city, and a smart city is, I would say, it's the peak of an Electropolis, where everything is connected, where there's innovation, where even there's modern education, there's inclusivity because of the technology. So this is a slide just showing an Electropolis there. Like I said, it's the road networks, it's the development, it's the development around it, it's the connectivity, the ease of moving goods and people around, the workforce in, and also there's also accommodation. There should be accommodation as well for the community there. And then the smart city, like I said, this would be modern education. It would be a smart environment with green buildings, green energy, and enabling government, transparency, open data, and smart living, where, yeah, smart living, where people actually do not just come to the airport to come and fly, but they can live and enjoy life around the airport instead of just only coming to fly in and out. It's about also smart transport, clean, different modes of transport, cycling around the airport, and all of that. The benefits of Electropolis. The first one is that it's a catalyst for economic growth, obviously because of the industries around it. And also there's the socio-economic return in terms of creation of meaningful jobs for the people. And yeah, and it also reduces environmental impact because we talked about the green businesses being encouraged. Examples now of successful Electropoli around the world. We have Dubai as a good example. We also have Frankfurt Airport and Schiphol. Now I just want to talk about the developments around the airport. I know that in one of the weaknesses you mentioned space, and I just want to say we do have land that is that needs to be developed. Okay, sorry, it's straight. Yeah, so I just want to talk about we do have big pockets of land that are still available for development. As I'm showing here. After this, we can have a conversation and I can connect you to the right people to talk to, should you have an interest. We also have offices in our Oval Park in close proximity. It's almost across opposite our cargo area for business that need to be close. I think before I close, I just want to also mention that we launched a mobile app as AXA. You just go into your favorite app store. You put in AXA app. This app will help you if you're flying. It will help you if you need to use any services around the airport, including, as you can see there, including our cargo operators. It will connect you to their website. It will give you important numbers to reach them. It's a very important app to have. Even your flight, you can subscribe to your flight, and if there's anything that changes regarding your flight, then it will push those messages to you. Just to talk about a few sort of initiatives that we have to support our cargo operators. We have a number of initiatives that we are working on at the moment. One is infrastructure. We are looking at configuring some of the parts. We know that we have issues with our entrance and exit. For instance, we need a slip lane at the entrance, and this is feedback from our cargo operators. We know that even at the exit, sometimes there's congestion. We know that when that cargo area was built, it was a long time ago. We were using bakkies at that time for collection and pickup of cargo. Now we're using horse and trailer, and we need to respond to that in terms of infrastructure to allow for that to happen. So we are exploring ways where we can make sure that happens. And also, for the mention of safety, I think in one of the presentations, we are looking at access control. In fact, we've implemented already technology into our access control, where and also integrated with IVS, which is a system that is used by the cargo operators. So there's now our access control system can talk to them and they can book clients in or out, and which improves efficiency and also safety. I thank you. I think I just forgot to do one thing. I just want to, I am not here by myself. I am here with the management from the airport. My manager, Mr. Mark McLean, is sitting at the back there. So just wanted to introduce.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Thank you, David. Lisa, you will be available for the questions and answers. Thank you very much. All right, let's put up our program here. The great thing of this program now is it announces a coffee break. And this coffee break, let me see, they're doing well on time. So let's take a coffee break for the sake of the online people as well. Let's sort of stay in our time frames, but maybe can we be back here at 11:45? So enjoy some networking, some refreshments, and we'll see you guys here at 11:45. Thank you again for you, Lisa and Exa, talking to us. Thank you so much. Ladies and gents, let's move back to our seats. Let's take up our seats. Thank you. Let's take up our seats. Test 1, 2. Right, let's get those people in there from the outside. The people who joined us on Zoom, you're welcome to click on the right click on a Transport Forums camera and you click on pin and it should prioritize the camera on your PC and your screen. Then you can follow us nicely. You guys on Zoom are welcome to make use of the chat room. You can type in questions there. When you get to the questions and answer session, we will also give you opportunity, to address those questions. But also our technology of such a fashion that we should be able to bring the Zoom people in that the audience can see you and hear you. So later on during questions and answers, we will try that and make the platform available for the Zoom people also to ask questions that the audience can see you when you switch on your camera. But right, that's another tricky exercise we're going to do a little bit later on. All right, people are entering the room. Thank you very much, people. Always when people return to a venue like this, it reminds me of the story of Bernard Shaw and Winston Churchill. I think I've told the story many times before, but it's so good. I don't know if it's true, but here goes. Apparently, Sir Bernard Shaw he forwarded the invitation to Churchill, inviting him to the premiere of his play. So he said, I'm forwarding a ticket to the premiere of my play, and I've also included the extra ticket for a friend, if you have one. And apparently Churchill replied, thank you very much for inviting me to the first evening of your play. I will gladly attend. Unfortunately, I can't attend the first evening, but I'll attend the second evening, if there is one. So I'm so glad to see you back here. Ladies and gents, I've been reminded by Cape Town Air Access that remember when we're done at around about 1:20, there will be a full lunch. Right, so there's lots of treats. It won't be here, it will be apparently around the corner in a special room, but there will be a full lunch. Please join us then for a full lunch and networking session. Okay, Jan, can I please have the program? There we go. So ladies and gents, it's still the 29th of September, 2022. And we're still talking about Cape Town's potential as a leader of the South African air cargo landscape, proudly being hosted today by Cape Town Air Access. Thank you very much for David, team, Melissa, Tar, for hosting us today. We really appreciate that. Our next presenter then is Mr. Basil Hannibal. He's from the South African Association of Freight Forwarders. He's going to talk about air freight modality. It's now post-COVID-19 into the future, critical modality facilitating cohesive supply chain movement matrix. Thank you very much, Basil. Get those slides up here. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Harry. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for the opportunity. Harry has already introduced the association, which is the South African Freight Forwarders Association, which is 100 years old. And of course, we are the apex voice of all the South African Freight Forwarding Association companies in South Africa. So let me begin with a proverb, okay? When the winds of change blow, some people build walls, others build windmills. There has been a significant change in our industry and lives in the past 3 years or so. However, as we've grown accustomed to, change is constant. Therefore, it is a good start with this Chinese proverb. In logistics, especially in South Africa, we must ensure that we build windmills and not walls to navigate the change and continue to facilitate trade smoothly. So this slide is a simplified the supply chain simplified. The supply chain simplified schematic of the multinational modal supply chains, showing you all the respective modalities moving across the logistics network. The logistics network is the core determinant allowing supply chains to function. As such, only 3 things are important: the cost, time, and service reliability. In South Africa, with our economic hubs being far away from seaports, our freight demand is very high. Therefore, we need a multimodal approach to satisfy our high freight demand. Ultimately, logistics can only function optimally in a shared infrastructure with shared responsibility for all parties. The choice of economy service functionality and related characteristics. This slide shows the characteristics of the respective modalities, showcasing the relationships regarding load, distance, and speed. For air cargo, specifically, the major strengths of modality are speed, freight protection, and flexibility. As with everything else, unfortunately, there are some weaknesses, including accessibility, high cost, and low capacity. Air cargo is a trade facilitator that contributes globally to the global economic development and creates millions of jobs. The global economy depends on stability to deliver high quality products at competitive prices to consumers worldwide. Air cargo transport over US$6 trillion worth of goods, accounting for approximately 35% of world trade value. Incidentally, some 7.4 billion parcels are sent every year by air cargo. This slide shows a summary of the current challenges in our international travel landscape. No economic story in the last years can be started without referring to COVID-19. Since South Africa is relatively small, open economy, and we invariably impacted by prevailing global situations, therefore, when investigating the current landscape, we need to first look at the global picture and zoom in into the South African view. Nonetheless, despite COVID being the main protagonist of the issues of the pandemic, not only the determinant explaining the current landscape, as global supply chains have been exacerbated by several other constraints, most notably the war in Ukraine. Fortunately, despite the challenges, international trade has performed very well, most notably via the air cargo modality. Indeed, because of the supply chain disruptions in ocean freight, which ships around 80%, and this is mentioned before, 80% of total volume, air freight has been noted as the savior with the same international supply chains. Moreover, air cargo is currently enjoying a cost-competitive edge over ocean freight, especially amid the rapid increase in international container freight rates. Altogether, the wide spread challenges have resulted in an adjustment to the new normal, with air cargo playing a prominent role. As with ocean freight, further disruptions have been experienced with the shortage of staffing and equipment at major airports because of zero handling, which has caused some delays. Fortunately, some of these issues have been alleviated. Concerning the South African landscape, we are trading against a backdrop of increasing commodity markets, most notably coal, oil, and wheat, inflation and potential stagflation, and resulted increased interest rate hikes and a weak exchange rate. Load shedding, as we all know, which has become a swear word according to accompanying business constraints. Low level of business, consumer and policy certainty, and the continuation of social instability, evident by instances of strike, wage negotiations, which is ongoing, obviously. And ultimately, some commentators have mentioned that we are likely witnessing the beginning of the largest disruption to global supply chains in the post-War II era. The greatest shock to aviation in its history. Returning to aviation, the aviation industry, this chart shows the devastating impact of the pandemic on passenger market. And I think, again, this was mentioned by some of the previous speakers, with the blue line indicating, okay, illustrating the historic trend of the passenger market, and the red line, the pre-pandemic forecasts in revenue passenger kilometers. As I'm sure everybody can attest to, there has been a massive reduction in the number of flights. Collectively, for 2.5 years between 2020 and 2022, the aviation industry has lost the equivalent of 1.8 times the 29 passenger level. Effectively, the industry experienced a 70% reduction in passenger flights. And again, this was spoken of earlier. Consequently, according to IATA, which is the International Air Transport Association, the forecasts show that air traffic would still be 6% below pre-pandemic forecasts. Resilient air cargo. This graph will show you, nevertheless, the massive shocks the air cargo market has been in savior in the turbulent times, whilst the recovery is going on in the rest of the aviation industry and subsectors. All air cargo remains strong and in a similar levels compared to pre-pandemic times. Although all other metrics, domestic passenger, international passenger, and the collective passenger market shows positive trends, the industry is still miles away from a full recovery. For air cargo, which has been very resilient, the immediate outlook has seen a slight reduction as the industry grapples with waning demand in trade and in general for consumers. Nevertheless, air cargo has been a savior throughout the pandemic, as the following slide will show. COVID phenomenon and pre-freighters. What is pre-freighters? It is explained earlier by AXA. It is the fact that cargo is being utilized more in the belly of the planes than passengers. And I think that was demonstrated clearly by the previous speakers. Amid the most stringent lockdown levels, passenger aircraft has been used as emergency freighter aircraft, which I've just mentioned. Consequently, the pandemic saw the emergence of pre-freighters, which are passenger freighters. This picture speaks to the characteristics of a smooth functioning supply chain, which is often typified by agility, sustainability, predictability, and transparency. So as you can see from the pic, the mask and all the other equipment that come through was all done by air freight. The importance of the pre-freighters seemed to start to diminish. Indeed, the role of the pre-freighters played in maintaining supply chains was very important which is a highlight in this chart. Typically, the air cargo market is approximately evenly split between dedicated freighters and cargo transports via the belly hold space on passenger flights. Again, this has been mentioned previously. However, with the grounding of many flights and almost non-starter nature of passenger market, the share of air cargo shipped via passenger flights significantly diminished. One can witness this phenomena in the graph. At the same time, the share of dedicated freighter flights increased substantially to a high level of 71% in June 2020. Again, this was highlighted previously by previous speakers. This situation brought about the phenomenon of pre-freighters, passenger planes being used as dedicated cargo planes, as illustrated in the pictures in the previous slide. Once again, this situation highlights the air cargo space acting as a savior for the supply chains. Nevertheless, as illustrated in the graph, the end of passenger freighters is imminent after Europe Safety Agency EASA ends the exemptions from July 1, which allowed cargo carriage in passenger cabins on seats or with seats removed during the pandemic. Air cargo prices are more competitive than ocean. It has been mentioned, not in this forum, but in other forums, where the cost of sea freight has more than doubled, or if not tripled, or even quadrupled. And my colleague Wayne Laszlo can attest to that, because freight rates, well, there you go. Container rates has in actual fact skyrocketed, whereas air freight rates are actually stable. And people should be using air freight more than, and now I'm punting air freight rather than sea freight. Sorry, Wayne. With widespread challenges in ocean freight, not only did the air cargo market enjoy a service reliability edge over ocean freight, but the air cargo market also enjoyed a cost competitive edge over ocean freight. With the massive increases in container freight rates globally and the accompanying increases in air cargo rates being so much more subdued, air freight is now a much more effective alternative to ocean freight. And obviously, it's about speed and reliability. The chart also illustrates the ratio of chargeable weights ratio per kilo for air cargo and container freight rates. The different modes are not always perfect substitutes, but different in characteristics. For example, air cargo allows fast moving, which is typically 12 times more expensive than ocean freight, which has now changed to 5 times, providing a cost competitive edge. Also, air cargo tends to overperform other modalities at the start of an economic upturn due to the restocking cycles, when businesses turn to air to refill inventories as demand rises. Once again, it expressed what I said earlier. The air market is vigilant, they are fast, and it's reliable if it works, obviously. Unfortunately, air cargo is also bound by capacity constraints, as belly space is not yet back to pre-pandemic levels. Air freight rates, the slide shows the comparative air freight rates across major routes. As mentioned before, air cargo increased, but not as much as container rates. Therefore, air cargo became a much more viable alternative to ocean freight. Therefore, air cargo kept aviation alive, as air cargo was a crucial source of revenue for many airlines, which is true. Air freight rates, as the chart illustrates, have increased after the shock of the pandemic, but rates are coming down as a result of decreasing demand and the moderation of the market. Across the major routes, the peak in rates has passed and now very similar to the 2021 level. Air modality key focus and progress. What about South Africa? The following slide shows the international cargo handled for South Africa and accompanying COVID level, as well as the prevailing business operational issues in the air cargo space. The graph comes from the weekly South User cargo movement reports. As the chart shows, after the shock of the pandemic, international air cargo has continued to rebound strongly with a sustained increase experienced in both inbound and outbound cargo flows. This bodes well for the industry and for the Cape Town International Airport. Nonetheless, operationally, there are still some constraints, including scanner stops and equipment. And as this was mentioned before, the implementation of IVS to grant security access to cargo precinct. And I think that IVS is currently in progress. And sorry? Yeah. Yes, that's what I'm saying now. It has been implemented, and in actual fact, for those that are available tomorrow, there's a session tomorrow at 10 o'clock for another presentation on IVS. So for those that are interested, you are most welcome to attend those. The system has gone live at ORT and Cape Town International over the last 3 weeks. Training is ongoing as freight agents, cargo handlers, transporters, etc. are getting up to speed with using the system. Collectively, industry is pleased with the implementation of the system. Lastly, there is an ongoing imbalance in inbound and outbound cargo as the graph illustrates. Sorry, yep. Okay, there we go. Sorry. However, this situation provides an opportunity for exports, specifically as there remains significant air cargo space on these fronts. So Westgrow and those that in Westgrow, again, there's an opportunity for our air freight cargoes because there are space on these flights. Also, the current cost competitive edge air cargo enjoys over ocean freight. South African cargo owners and institutions such as Westgrow, and I've just mentioned them, can exploit this opportunity and promote South African exports to the market. Domestic performance, Cape Town is strong. This slide, also taken from the weekly South User cargo movement reports, shows the domestic air cargo handled across our major domestic airports. Incidentally, Cape Town has performed admirably over the last couple of months and has even surpassed Johannesburg concerning domestic air cargo handling. The ongoing trend is positive and bodes well for the immediate future, also highlighting the strength of air cargo market, but showing the importance of a multimodal approach is the Sea Track Transport and Freight Index, illustrating the annual change in transport activity across the sub-sectors. Collectively, air freight has increased by 12.2% compared to the same time last year. How critical is the logistics network for the facilitation of trade in a healthy society? Just summarize the importance there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Basil, for a very informative presentation. Right, thank you. So Basil, hopefully be available for the questions and answers. Thank you very much. Righty, our program again, ladies and gents, our next presenter then will be from one of the Transport Forums Gold sponsors, Global Trade Solution. It's Mr. Anton Eccles. I hope I've got it right, Anton. And Anton is a solution architect with Global Trade Solution. He's going to talk about insight into the current developments around trade enablement and the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement and the potential impact on the air cargo industry. Thank you, Anton.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Anton Eccles. I'm from Global Trade Solution. So I think Harry did give a brief intro to what we do. We're a solutions and consulting company looking at helping importers and exporters manage their international supply chains, as well as looking at working with customs authorities within the African region. So today I'm going to be talking about the AFTA trade agreement and just some of the touch points within the air industry. And you know, some of the potential growth that it has. I think the first speaker, Joshua, pointed out the potential for trade within Africa, within the Western Cape region, and I think a lot of that potential is driven by opportunities that Africa trade agreement potentially create. So first of all, just what is AFTA? So we call it AFTA, African Continental Free Trade Agreement. It's one of the key initiatives or projects within the African Union, and it looks to create a continental-wide trade agreement. So at the end, it would actually be the largest free trade agreement in the world. So it's quite an ambitious target or project globally. So there's 4 key pillars within the AFTA trade agreement. I'll be focusing firstly and mostly on the trading goods within this talk. So the trading goods really looks at duty and tariff concessions. So the aim is that over 90% of all products, the duties will be liberalized on that. So essentially be able to be traded duty free. And then a further 7% would be traded duty free over 10 years and for least developed countries over 13 years. There's obviously also rules of origin that go with that in order to determine what products are deemed to be manufactured within Africa. Trade and services is also really important. So that looks at communications, the financial industries, tourism, transport, and business services. There's a third pillar for dispute resolution. So just how do we adjudicate and manage disputes within the region? And then I think the 4th pillar is also really important. So trade facilitation looks at transit rules, creating capacity within the African continent and within the customs authorities within the African continent. It looks at non-tariff barriers and also sanitary and phytosanitary measures. So sanitary and phytosanitary measures are also really important for the Western Cape, given the importance of the agricultural economy that we've just seen presented earlier on. And ultimately, through these 4 pillars, the idea is to increase intra-African trade and also ultimately to boost the income and reduce poverty in the region. So why is AFTA necessary? So I think it's a well-known narrative that Africa has very low intra-regional trade. So if you look at the top graph there, Africa's intra-regional trade is roughly 15 to 16% of total trade. Whereas if you're looking at sophisticated markets like the European Union or NAFTA, which is the North American Free Trade Agreement, they range from anything from 60% to 40%. Africa is also generally seen as a net importer of manufactured products. Again, we saw that in some of the graphs and statistics shown earlier. And we also generally tend to export the low value products and import the higher value added products. So intra-regional trade is seen as a key enabler of more complex value chains that allows countries to then be able to export value-added products. And that's why the AFTA Free Trade Agreement is seen as so important. So through those mechanisms that I highlighted on the first slide, it aims to both reduce the tariff, so i.e. duties on products that are traded within AFTA, but also the non-tariff barriers. And I think that the non-tariff barriers are as important as the tariff barriers, because there's been a number of studies that show even though reducing duties on products that are traded is really important in terms of the overall cost of the goods, non-tariff barriers are as important and sometimes actually create a bigger contributor to the cost of products than the tariff itself. The opportunity really within Africa is, the population as a percentage of the world is roughly 16 to 17%, whereas we only form a small part of the global trade in goods and services, so roughly 2.5%. So the other issue within Africa is that there's currently a number of overlapping trade agreements and regional economic communities in the region. If you look at the slide here, you'll see, for example, South Africa is part of SACU, we're part of SADC. If we look at some of our neighboring countries, take, for example, Eswatini, they're part of SADC, SACU, COMESA, and you have a number of these different overlapping trade agreements. And some are a lot stronger than others, and that creates complexity in terms of understanding what trade regimes you could use to trade within Africa. So the idea is that AFTA will then create a single trade agreement that you could trade under with uniform rules across the region. And ultimately, once the 10 or 13-year period is completed, a liberalized tariff and duty rate across the region. However, it's just important to note that AFTA doesn't preclude you from trading under any of the other agreements that are in place. So, for example, SADC trade agreement will remain in place even as AFTA is in terms of trade and services, I think the same narrative really happens within trade and services. Currently, Africa is about 4% of the global trade and services. And as a percentage of GDP, you'll see that we are typically smaller than the world average, which is approximately 13%, whereas Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, is roughly 11.5%. And again, if you look at a more sophisticated market like the EU, it's roughly 27% of the total GDP is trade and services. So there's a huge opportunity to increase the percentage of GDP that's contributed by services. And that's why that one pillar within the AFTA trade agreement is really important. So why does this all matter to the air industry? So I think in 2019, I'm going to exclude COVID. I think there's a number of speakers that have spoken about COVID and the impact that it's had. So up until 2019, against Africa was 17% of the world population, but only 3% of the passengers. So there's a huge opportunity for growth within the African air travel market. Again, Africa is typicalized by poor connectivity and high costs of travel within Africa. I mean, I could talk to my own experiences doing a lot of work in places like Eswatini, for example. For me to get from Cape Town to Eswatini probably costs the same as it does to fly to Dubai and roughly the same time period. So and Eswatini is obviously on our doorstep and is one of our key sort of trading partners. So that's just one example, and there's a number of those examples that are around. I think us in Cape Town, thanks to the work that's been done by Westgrow, we're more fortunate than some other cities. I think of people that live in Durban, the challenges that they have traveling across Africa. Nothing is a direct flight almost ever. So the successful implementation of AFTA will require better air connections. Trade in goods means more air freight. Trade in services mean more people. And I think the prevalence of landlocked countries in Africa, as well as the poor road and rail connections, potentially even make air travel more important in Africa than it does in some other geographies around the world. I think one of the speakers touched on that. I think ideally that would be supported by an open skies agreement. The South Africa or single African transport market is part of the AU agenda for 2063. And that's the same agenda that the AFTA is part of. So I think there is a recognition that a lot of these things go hand in hand. So free trade requires connectivity, and connectivity, I think, requires free trade. I think that the important thing, though, to note is that although we only make up 3% of passenger numbers, and again, excluding COVID, you'll see there has been a rapid growth of air travel within Africa up until 2019. And I'm pretty sure that will continue going forward. So what is the process? And I think there's been a lot of talk about AFTA, but up until now, not a single good has been traded under AFTA yet. So for all the promise that's out there, unfortunately, it is still just promise at the moment. So I think for traded goods, there's two key processes that are taking place that will lead up to trading goods. So first of all, it's the actual negotiation of the tariff concessions and the negotiation of the rules of origins. And those are the key kind of enablers for allowing trade to commence within on AFTA. So at the moment, so the process for basically submitting and having tariff concessions agreed is that the state parties or the regional economic communities like EAC and SACU and so on would submit their tariff concessions through to the AFTA Secretariat. Secondly, the AFTA Secretariat would then verify that the tariff concessions actually meet the rules, what they call it, modalities under the AFTA agreement. So basically what that means is that there needs to be that 90% of tariff liberalization. So they need to, liberalize at least 90% of the products that you would trade within that region. For most countries, that would be, the tariff would be phased down over a 5-year period and 10 years for least developed countries. Then there's an allowance for 7% of sensitive products that countries would select. And for those, a longer period of the phase down of the duties is allowed for. So either 10% for most countries and 10 years for most countries and 13 years for least developed countries. And then there's a final 3% that it's excluded from liberalization. So that's what the verification process goes through. And once it's verified, the tariff concessions are then published. And ultimately, at the end of the day, before we can start trading on those tariff concessions, they need to then be gazetted at a national level. So at the moment, there's 28 countries that have actually gone through the verification step and have had their tariff concessions published. South Africa is not one of those countries, just of interest. And there are a few more that are coming online, we're hoping quite soon. So in order to promote transparency of information and of the process, AFTA's launched quite a number of different electronic tools to promote access to this information. One of those is the e-tariff book. And that's a tool that allows traders, stakeholders, anyone of interest to be able to look at what tariff concessions have been published by the different countries and regional economic forums. So it allows you to search for either by a tariff code, a harmonized tariff code, or a product description, and you could print those details out for future reference. I think one of the nice features is also a side-by-side comparison. So you can also look at your product in context of the broader African countries which have submitted their tariff concessions and see where you have the best opportunities in terms of tariff for importing or exporting. As well as that the rules of origin manuals also being covered. So the link to the website is there below, and I'll just take you through some of the features of it with a few screenshots. So you've got the ability to indicate where you're exporting from and where you're interested in exporting to. As I said, you can search for either a product description, or if you know the HS code, you can look for that particular product. And you can also then use a language of your choice. The AFTA Secretariat is quite keen on promoting access to information, and therefore all the information is published in both English, French, Spanish, Swahili even. So all of those options are available from a language perspective. Once you've searched for your particular product, it will give you the breakdown of those products that meet your search criteria. And then I think the important thing is to understand then from there, what is the current rate of duty, or what's known as the MFN rate of duty. So you can see in this example, I've searched for coffee that I'd like to export from Ghana to Zambia as an example. And we can see that Zambia current rate of duty on coffee is 25%, and that would be stepped down to 0% over a period of 10 years. So that gives you the ability to understand how those duties will change over time. There's also an advanced search functionality where you can further drill down and search to this information to be able to slice it and dice it a bit finer. Then, as I mentioned, I think one of the key or nice features of it is to then take your product that you've identified and be able to compare the duties across the region. So you're able to look at, you know, in this example, my coffee that I'm wanting to export to Zambia, but I can also see what are the duty rates across the region. So, for example, I can see in DRC that the rate of duty is typically 45%, and again is stepping down to 0% over a 10-year period. Whereas I think in Mauritius, the rate of duty is already 0%. So it gives you a nice tool to be able to identify products that you'd like you potentially see for export and what the duty rates are for those products. So just some final thoughts around AFTA. So I think, as I say, a lot of work is being put in place at the moment to create promotion of information through tools like the AFTA e-tariff. And to allow trade to prepare for trade under AFTA and to identify these opportunities. But again, I think these tariff concessions are only useful once trade can actually start using them. And there's a big push at the moment in AFTA to identify a pool of pilot countries to really start trade under the AFTA trade agreement. And we're hoping that would take place relatively soon, because ultimately it's only once, as I say, the trade starts that this thing becomes powerful and useful. The AFTA trade agreement will require better air connections. There's no doubt about it. It's just a question of whether air connections are an enabler of the trade in goods, or does trade goods pull the air connections with it, or a bit of a chicken and an egg scenario of which comes first. Does the trade have to happen first and then the air connections, or do we create these connections? I mean, I think that the promise with AFTA is that ultimately it would boost Africa's income by $450 billion by 2035. So that's a massive boost in trade and income across the region, and that's definitely going to spill over into the air industry as a whole industry. I think that the key thing would still be is a open skies agreement to create stronger regional airlines to be able to create those connectivities between African countries. As I mentioned in my story, but I think there's a lot of key areas that are underserved or underconnected. I think David's slide pointed out sort of West Africa as a point. There's very little flights going into there at the moment, and it's a key trading area for South Africa and the Western Cape. So I think that would be a key thing, and it is, as I say, part of the African trading agreement, so in the AU project. So yeah, thank you very much. It's me.
Thank you so much, Anton. I think this microphone's battery just, there you go. Thank you so much, Anton. Really appreciate it. Definitely a different view in Africa now. So important to understand the bigger picture, and clearly GTS is doing very good work on that. And we're looking forward to learning from you in the panel discussion as well. All right, so our last presenter then for this afternoon, but not the least, is Mr. Farai Charesh. Right, and he's an energy analyst and project officer at WWF South Africa. He's going to talk about sustainable aviation fuel production blueprint. Thank you very much, Farai. We've been looking forward to this presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. As I said, my name is Farai from WWF, or the World's Wide Fund for Nature. And I'm going to be, good. Okay, I'm going to be speaking to you about sustainable aviation fuels, its potential and opportunities in South Africa. So, you know, we've read the work that I'm going to present to you today is work that we've done with a number of partners, including Stellenbosch University, the CSI, as well as Imperial Logistics. So just to give you some background about where we're coming from, we've read today about the importance of air travel, particularly for cargo, as well as for trade and tourism in general. But what I want to highlight to you today is around the growing climate impact of aviation. We all know about the effect of climate change. I'm not going to delve deeper into that in this presentation. Commercial aviation industry accounts for about 2 to 3% of global CO2 emissions. And if we are to look into, and this is expected to grow or to about 22% of all man-made or anthropogenic CO2 emissions if there's no intervention. If you're to dive into the South African context, all civil aviation, it's about 8% of the total transport emissions, so quite a significant number, and it's higher than rail, and this comes after road transport. In terms of implications, you could potentially see tourism being affected by climate change. So what you've seen recent developments, particularly in the EU, more travelers are being climate conscious. A couple of years ago, there was this movement called Flight Shame in Norway, where people are shunning long distance travel. We've seen the Presidential Climate Commission here in South Africa highlighting that the emissions along with long-haul tourism could be would pose a threat to our local tourism industry. Looking more towards trade and air cargo, the EU has proposed the carbon border adjustment mechanism. So what that essentially means is that all goods that are not made in the EU and that are exported, the emissions associated with those products are going to be accounted when that product lands in the EU. So the idea there is the EU have strong carbon policies, and they're trying to avoid what they call carbon leakage, whereby products are made using a lot of fossil fuels overseas and then coming to the EU. So the transport emissions are a huge part of that, and that's something that South Africa would need to account and to look into. So definitely a solution for decarbonizing aviation needs to be looked at. You see on the screen there are a number of options, mitigation options that can be looked at, particularly for aviation. And what I show you on the screen are the mitigation options as highlighted by IATA, the International Air Transport Associations, which represents about 83% of the total air freighters in the world, including 3 South African airlines on that particular list. So they see a huge role for sustainable aviation fuels in reducing the global emissions. So by 2050, they expect about 65% of all emission reductions from aviation coming from sustainable aviation fuels of SAF. Of course, there are other options, as you see, such as new propulsion. So there's new propulsion systems such as electric aircraft or hydrogen aircraft, but these are more limited to short distances and not necessarily long haul distances to Europe or the Americas, because they don't have the same energy density that your current liquid fuels have. Also, improvements in air transport management systems are also expected to contribute. So what do you mean when we talk about sustainable aviation fuels? So we're talking about fuels that are chemically similar to conventional jet fuel, and typically made for non-fossil fuel feedstocks. They generally have lower emissions than fossil fuels on a life cycle basis, typically greater than 60%, but mostly it's usually around 80% or higher. And the interesting thing about your sustainable aviation fuels is they can be used in existing infrastructure without any modifications. So the same airplane that's flying today between Johannesburg and Cape Town, you can put that in sustainable aviation fuels. Currently, the limit is about 50% blending that you can put in an aircraft. But your aircraft manufacturers, your Boeings and your Airbus, they're saying that by 2030, we're probably going to be seeing airlines running on 100% sustainable aviation fuels. So just looking at IATA's goal, we're talking about 2% of conventional, talking about replacing 2% of conventional jet fuel by 2025, which is about 7.9 billion liters globally, or 65% of conventional jet fuel by 2050, or 449 billion liters. There's also regulatory support for this. The EU Parliament just recently backed a SAF blending mandate. So which that one is around about 2% SAF penetration in 2025 and increasing to, I think, 5% by 2030. So there's definitely movements in this space. So why should South Africa pursue this opportunity? So firstly, I think the excellent resource base, so the feedstocks that we can use to produce these fuels. And then secondly, long-term experience with promising production technologies. So we are quite fortunate enough, we've got the likes of Sasol, as well as Petro SA here in the Western Cape, which have technologies that can be used to produce these fuels. Then secondly, we need to start decarbonizing our own aviation sector. So domestically, the aviation sector is has a domestic a carbon tax liability. It's not, it's still quite low, but what we've seen with the recent carbon tax bill is that carbon tax liability is going to increase over time. So there's that need for decarbonization to happen. And also SAF represents an important export opportunity to allow us to produce high value products and send those overseas. And then given the recent news, I think it's an interesting thing around SAF as a security of supply. So we'll be able to produce this locally. So, you know, most likelihood of interruptions in the jet fuel supply system. And I think it's only important to highlight that it's not something for the future. It's something that's here now. Back in 2016, South African Airways piloted a project whereby they flew on SAF between Johannesburg and Cape Town. That program didn't really go well, fly afterwards. But more recently, as you can see from the screen, there are more programs and more airlines uptaking SAF globally, and airports SAF, offering SAF at a frequent basis. So it's really picking off, and the landscape has changed dramatically since the last time that SAA tried this locally. Just looking at the airlines that fly into South Africa that have SAF ambitions, so these airlines flying in pre-COVID, so all of these have ambitions to have SAF, to use SAF globally. And as you can see from the previous slide, United Airlines happens to be one of the biggest SAF uptakers currently worldwide. They're signing or they're purchasing SAF all over the world, and they're one of the most ambitious commitments. So there's quite a real opportunity to tap into all these opportunities. I'm just going to take through you some of the approach we took to estimate this opportunity. Some of the slides are quite technical, so I'll just go through them relatively quickly. So the first important aspect of that was looking at the different feedstocks or the sustainable feedstocks that could be found in South Africa. The first one is Solaris. So there's a nicotine-free tobacco, which was used by SAA in their trial back in 2016. A-molasses is a byproduct of the sugarcane production system. So what you see in the sugarcane industry is they're currently struggling because they're selling all their excess sugar at below production cost on the international market. So there's opportunity to divert some of this sugar to produce jet fuels. Industrial off gases, these are carbon monoxide rich gases that are produced in ferroalloy smelting or steel smelting. South Africa is quite a significant iron and steel industry, so there's an important opportunity there. And the biggest feedstock that we've realized for South Africa is the cleared invasive alien plants, or cleared IAPs. So these are typically your water hungry, water thirsty non-indigenous crops that have been decimating our forests and environments for quite some time. I know the Western Cape government has been working on a program to try and eradicate this, especially in riparian areas around day zero. The national program, the national government is a national program called Working for Water that is looking to clear these invasive alien species. But what you see is that the rate of clearing in those programs is not fast enough because there isn't anything to do with that biomass or with that cleared wood. Most of the time it stays in the field and it's a fire risk and it doesn't solve any problem. So that's a big opportunity. You also see on the slide there the selection of self-production processes. These are the approved pathways. So when we talk about producing these fuels, there's certain methods that are set aside by ASTM International that you have to follow to produce. So these are what we looked at in terms of the production. That is basically all the pathways. I won't bore you with the details. So the approach was we looked at where the biomass was located and sized the facilities accordingly. And we did a network optimization analysis to see where's the best place to put these facilities across South Africa. And then costed how much it would transport the biomass to those facilities. And then also did techno-economic modeling to find out how much is produced at a certain site. And then afterwards did to aggregate everything to come up with the national self-production potential. So the first three feedstocks you see there, they're different feedstocks. So you can, the assumption is that you can run those currently. And then for the last feedstocks, for pathways 4 to 7, they use the same feedstocks, so they compete. Pathway 6A was what we found to be the most economical, and that's what we chose for the lignocellulosic waste, which is the cleared invasive alien plants. We also looked at two scenarios, one where energy self-sufficiency, where all the process needs for those facilities use whatever feedstock you're producing. And we also looked at an external energy scenario where you bring in green hydrogen, given how the interest that green hydrogen is getting in the country at present. Just looking at the Western Cape, the map on the right shows you where you'd find those invasive alien plants. As I mentioned before, IAPs threaten biodiversity, water security, productive use of land, and ecological function of ecosystem. And their removal is mandated by law. So it's something that really need to be tackled and looked at. So just going deeper into the self-opportunity for South Africa after having gone through that analysis was, as you can see on the graph there, it shows on the left-hand side, the cost per liter of the sustainable aviation fuel. And on the right, it shows you the total production volumes. So it's what we found was that the price of sustainable aviation fuels is quite high compared to your conventional jet fuel now. So it can range anything between 2 to 5 times the price. It's highly expensive. But what we could produce in South Africa is cost competitive with the production cost internationally. So that's the dotted line on the screen. It's also important to note, as much as this SAF price is quite high, there's a structural shortage of this jet fuel in the market. Companies, airlines are looking to see where they can buy it. So it's an important, given the high price, there's still a market for it, and it's an opportunity that should be pursued. So obviously you see that when you use green hydrogen, there are opportunities to increase the total potential of this sustainable aviation fuel. And what we saw was that pathway 2, which is the sugarcane pathway. Obviously, this is limited to KwaZulu-Natal and Mpumalanga because that's where we grow sugarcane in the country, is the most cost effective pathway, and probably that would be the route to produce SAF the quickest in South Africa because the sugarcane value chains already exist. Then on the slide now, you can see the total SAF production potential in South Africa on the left-hand side of the screen. So in the self-sufficiency scenario, where we're using only the biomass, we can produce up to 3.2 billion liters of sustainable aviation fuels. So now, roughly pre-COVID, the country consumed about 2.5 billion liters of jet fuel per annum. So that is more than the jet fuel requirement in South Africa. So that means we could be self-sufficient by producing all this locally. If we're now to do the external energy scenario, we use green hydrogen, that production potential increases to about 4.5 billion liters, way more than what we could need. And it will also take into account any additional self requirement that would be needed by growth and by growth in the aviation space in South Africa, as well as Africa. On the right-hand side, so you will see where our proposed location of SAF's facilities, the sustainable aviation fuel facilities, would be in across the country. On the right-hand side, obviously, on the northeastern parts of the country is where the highest potential is, because that is where you've got most of the feedstock. So that's area around Mpumalanga, as well as northern KZN, Limpopo, and also northern, and also some part of the Free State. So the advantage of that is closest to Tambo International Airport, which consumes most of the jet fuel in South Africa. So that is a good thing in terms of transport and getting it there. And you could potentially see a situation where your facilities closer to the coast can be used for exporting that stuff, and the more inland facilities for domestic usage. If you look from there's one facility in the Western Cape that would be located around Montague. So that would produce about 202 to 352 million liters per annum. So about 30 to 50% of the jet demand at the Cape Town International Airport. Just to note that all this jet fuel meets the sustainability requirements of the Roundtable on Sustainable Biomaterials. So it's the gold standard against which all bioproducts and biofuels are measured against in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, as well as making sure there are no harmful impacts, social impacts, as well as impacts on land, food, water, and so forth. Another important thing that I wish to highlight is, given our challenges as a country around poverty, unemployment, and inequality, there's a huge opportunity to create jobs, bring jobs, over 90,000 of them, possible in South Africa by implementing this industry. That slide just shows you some of the breakdown of the jobs by pathway. I'm not going to spend some time on that. And then what you see there are potential transport jobs from terms of trucking. We didn't model using pipelines, but we looked at situations where trucks would be used to move the biomass as well as the products. And that's about 7,500 trucking jobs nationally. Zooming into the coal mining regions, so a lot of talk about what's going to happen to coal truckers after moving from coal to renewable electricity. Could translate, or about 75% of the coal truckers that's 3,500 jobs, can be directly moved to transporting biomass for sustainable aviation fuels. An important aspect here is around the macroeconomic impacts, because we looked at different scenarios whereby either we are only substituting the jet fuel that we're importing into the country, or we are exporting everything. And there's going to be, obviously, if you look at those scenarios, there's going to be a range of the impact on the trade balance. So that would range from about 80 billion to 170 billion per annum. So just some key messages. This industry is quite key in creating new green jobs, a key pillar of the energy transition in the country. We're talking about employment for truck drivers over 7,500, over 20,000 farm workers in growing the food stocks, and potentially more due to harvesting peas, as well as preserving jobs at risk in the sugarcane industry. Also, SAF could be an important anchor for the South Africa's hydrogen economy. As I mentioned before, a technical potential of about 3.2 to 4.5 billion liters, and an export potential of 2 to 3.3 billion liters. I've mentioned the trade balance benefit before, which is great because we are adding value for adding value and exploiting that overseas. And one key important conclusion was that most of these pathways to produce SAF are quite competitive with international prices already, and with relatively minor policy support, including farmer support mechanism or some capital subsidies here and there, that competitivity could be increased further. And one key issue is also from a government perspective to have, government putting this SAF industry, laying up an attractive policy environment for investments to flow in, because clearly the appetite is there globally as well. And I think it's quite important that we have relevant stakeholders from the various government departments, people producing the feedstock, fuel producers, airlines, airports, tourism, bodies, everyone to come together and kind of create a roadmap for how we take this forward in South Africa and how this is done. We've seen such a process being initiated in Ethiopia already. So I think it's an opportunity that South Africa needs to jump on, and there are multiple benefits for both our the industry as a whole, the aviation industry as a whole, and the economy at large. So you're welcome to visit the website with more information about SAF, and one of the reports that goes into details about what I've covered today. And the one on the right just looks at, if you want to grow crops for this, how would you do it sustainably, and where would that be? Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Farai. This was very, very interesting. Sustainable into the future for the sake of our children and for the sake of this planet. Thank you very much for the hard work you guys are doing. So, ladies and gents, now it's an exciting time. We're going to do the panel discussions Q&A. So Kobe Heyman standing at the back there, she's going to circulate that bell, glass bell. Is that what you call it? Flask, bell. And please drop your business cards in there. We're preparing so long for the lucky draws. And so please drop your business card in there. And if you haven't got a business card, what you can do is take your name tag and you remove the paper portion from the name tag and drop that in there. You haven't got a business card with you. All right, so so we can do that so long. And then I would kindly have our presenters that's still here to please come to the front. We'll have to do a little juggle here with chairs. So I would love them to sit at the front here, our panelists. We're going to focus this camera here in front on them. And then we can do the questions and answers. And we're also going to give the people on Zoom opportunity to talk to us. So that's a little bit technology challenge, but maybe we'll be able to manage. So I'll talk to the Zoom people just now. We'll first take questions from the audience here, the in-person audience, and then we'll give the Zoom people opportunity to ask questions. And also I see there's already questions in the chat room on Zoom. The people are asking questions. So we also will take those questions in the chat room. So can we have the panelists here at the front, please? And let's bring the chairs along. See, they're doing now their daily exercise. As soon as you guys are sitting, then we'll give Jan Manus opportunity to zoom into you. Anton, maybe if you guys can move a little bit to the front. You don't have this light in your eyes. Move a little bit to the right. I'm just looking at Jan and asking whether he's giving me the thumbs up, so he's managing. Can you throw the gentleman on the big screen? Jan, are you there? Something. All right, so now the Zoom people and YouTube people can see our panel, you see. And we're using fancy technology, we're very proud of this. So you can switch between different views and different cameras and so on. And we like a live television broadcast here. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you in the audience to put up your hand. I'll bring the microphone to you and you can ask a question to the panel. You please identify yourself when you ask the question. Also keep it one question at a time. And then we'll bring the microphone to the front so the panel can respond to your question. Yeah, so no personal remarks. And then we will take the Zoom people, it will be their turn. So can I see a hand for anybody who's got a question for the panel? Can't be nobody. But let's, Kobe, let's read one of the questions just to get the thinking going. Question on Zoom. Okay, so from Willem van Zyl, he's asking here on Zoom, can Anton give us his thoughts on the trade facilitation aspects of AFTA and also World Trade Organization? Specifically, SA seems to be slow out of the blocks regarding single window and AEO authorized economic operator arrangements commitments. Anton, have you followed that question?
Yeah, thank you. So there's kind of two parts to that question, so I'll try and answer it. So the first is the trade facilitation portion of AFTA and WTO, and the second was just around the South African single window and AEO. So yeah, the trade facilitation portion of AFTA, as I sort of put on the presentation, is a key pillar of what they're doing. And there is a lot of work and they are building up for that. I think it's potentially a more difficult area to solve in the sense that there are so many countries there and within the AFTA region and there are so many different operating models within the region. And the AU, for example, already has a mechanism where parties can log non-tariff barriers for resolution. We've sort of anecdotally tried to log our own previously and not really received much response on it. So I think it is a more difficult problem to solve, and I do think it's a more of a long-term issue. So, but I think the AFTA Secretariat has, they literally started 2 years ago from nothing. I mean, there was no, there was the Secretary General and himself. And I think over the last 2 years, they've done an incredible job of building up that capacity. So they've, appointed some really senior and very capable people into key positions and are filling out these roles and capacity. So I'm sure over time that capability will strengthen. In terms of South Africa and the question around single window and AEO. So first of all, AEO is happening in South Africa. There's a strong drive at the moment to get companies registered on AEO. So maybe just for those that don't know, AEO stands for Authorized Economic Operator. So it's basically a facility or a process whereby exporters and importers, as well as customs brokers, would in essence go through an audit by SARS, and SARS would vet your processes and your procedures, and post that if they're happy with what they see. And I'm doing this in very simplistic layman terms, would give you a gold star and say, your processes are up to scratch. And as a benefit of that process, you will get lower customs stops. You get access to a sort of key account sort of holder type person, which you can talk to. So there are a lot of benefits to the AEO program, and it's a program that is endorsed by the World Customs Organization. So it's in line with a number of similar programs around the world. And South Africa and SARS is also talking to some of our neighboring countries, whereby they would sign what's called a mutual recognition agreement, whereby you would then be AEO in South Africa and, for example, in Namibia, as an example. And thereby you can create this sort of secure supply chain where both the exporter, the importer are AEO certified parties, and therefore benefit from lower customs intervention, inspections, and so on. So that is something very much, I think it's in the go. From a single window perspective, I think SARS has not gone that route. I have heard seen some articles recently that they're talking again about single window. So I think single window, SARS's approach is slightly different to maybe some of the rest of the African countries, and I'm just talking our peers, whereby they've looked to create an ecosystem of interconnected systems as opposed to this one monolithic system that would then talk to all the government agencies that operate around a border. So I think they've done parts of it, but maybe not in the way that it's maybe been done in some other countries. I don't think it's necessarily less effective than what's been done in some other countries. So that would be my kind of thoughts on single window. Thank you. Too long.
One, two, there we go. All right. I had to get that one in. Thank you. I'll come to the front now. Just want to make sure it's still working. Yeah. Thank you very much, Anton. Very interesting answer. So here's a question.
Thank you. My question is directed to Mr. Chair. Yeah, based on the sustainable aviation facilities that are going to be established, and I've noticed that only one will be established in the Western Cape. You have identified Montague as a location, and the question is why. And the second question is what's going to be the pit stop for that facility. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. So what we did a supply chain optimization study, and what we tried to do was to locate the facilities as close to the feedstock as possible. So you see that with processes that use biomass that transport feedstock, it's quite it's not dense. So I mean the transport component is usually one of the biggest cost factors. So you want to transport to locate those facilities as close to the feedstock as possible. So based on the availability of the feedstock, that the logistics model optimization came up with Montague as the closest facility. So what the model did was it tried to locate it to towns or cities where infrastructure already exists. So not somewhere in the middle of nowhere where would you need to build new roads, etc. So that's why it came out at Montague. In terms of the feedstock, so that feedstock was the invasive alien plants that I was talking about. So invasive alien plants is typically your wattle, your pines, and the eucalyptus. And as I mentioned before, various government programs, provincial government, national governments are currently clearing these invasive alien plants. We've been looking at different methods of adding value to these plants or to these wood species once they've been cleared. So mostly it's been trying to make furniture out of them, to try and make biochar. There's other potential value chains, but those are not big enough to kind of eradicate those plants. So what you see is that the current rate of clearing is slower than the rate at which they are growing. So the other thing about these plants when they're brought in is because they grow very fast. That's why we grew them. That's why they want it. But now they are overtaking the natural landscape and bringing those negative environmental benefits that I talked about. So that would be the feedstock for that facility in Antwerp. Yes.
Thank you, Farai. Right, another question in the audience?
Hi, everybody. I'm Moira Keiko from the organization Stanwood. I've also got a question latching onto the previous question that was posed right today. When I'm looking at the landscape in the Western Cape, I think the garden route is one of the most densely forestation areas, even Grabouw. And when I'm looking at the communities, very impoverished. And as an organization, we are looking at opportunity for those deep rural areas and how they can actually contribute positively to the economy, but also uplift communities. So when I'm looking at Grabouw, it's not too far from the Cape Town International Airport. And the same with the garden route. It's not too far from George. So can we get that dialogue going?
Thank you, Moira.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. So what we did this study is to try to get that dialogue going and recognize them and put out these opportunities out there so that we can start acting and working on them. You're very right. The garden route is quite also infested, or going all the way to Kuka in the Eastern Cape. But so what our study did was looking at a national level. So you would see in that map there are some facilities in the Eastern Cape area. So we're seeing where that biomass would also go based on the logistics of optimization. So there are all those opportunities. If you look at the garden route specifically, so what our study did was to look at potential for new facilities where this would happen. But the garden route is an interesting case because you've got Petro SA, which is currently mothballed and there's no feedstock for it. So it's quite a solution is to make use of those existing assets, whereby you can take that feedstock. You need still some capital investment there and utilize the facility like Petro SA. And obviously it will have significant economic impacts to that opportunity. So similar with SASO also in Secunda, they could look at getting some of the biomass going into an existing facility. So we didn't cost that. We did look at that in some previous studies, but what would that mean is the sustainable aviation fuel that we produce would be much cheaper than we currently produce now. So that would be an advantage to try to work with those existing facilities to make this happen.
Thank you, Farai. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll get to you now. Let's try something. Willem van Selle is asking us questions, but Willem, is it perhaps possible to unmute yourself and let's see if you can ask the question? We should be able to hear you.
Thanks, Harry. Sorry, I didn't expect that. Thanks for the opportunity to ask another question. I really don't want to hog the floor. So I'm part of a consulting team looking at the air cargo policy at the moment, actually the air cargo strategy. And it was interesting in one of the early presentations by David, if I remember correctly, that policy issues and policy uncertainty and so was raised as a I think it was a threat to air cargo. So that obviously catches the ear, and the various aspects of the supply chain have come up today. So there's the whole topic of air access. There has to be enough movement be it belly or freighter. There have to be facilities. The point was made, it could have been by Joshua, about the blueberries and the need for cold storage and protecting the cold chain. And then in Anton's presentation, the whole issue of trade rules and obviously then trade facilitation came up. So those things cut across the whole spectrum of where there are possible interventions to improve the situation. So I'm kind of curious how the panel would react to a question of, you know, if you were to scale or prioritize these issues, air access versus physical things around the airports and on the ground, and so versus what I called in my question, the bureaucracy aspects, the rules, the paperwork, you know, the approval certificates and what have you, you know, where over those three areas, air access, physical facilities and bureaucracy, do they think the lowest hanging fruits are?
Well, thank you. Can you perhaps switch on your camera? I just want to see if we can see you.
Harry, I can do that, but I'm not dressed for this situation.
There you go. We can see you. You just need to
Sorry
spot by
for
that one, but okay. Thank you, Willem. We saw you. So the panel can respond.
No, I was giving it to you, Lisa.
From me, but because I'm just thinking lowest hanging fruit, which would mean the easiest to implement, to put in place. Yeah. We know how long we take with policy. I think there's a number of things that the government has been working on that have not happened or materialized. So I don't think that would be a low hanging fruit. So that leaves two things, which would be the infrastructure on the ground. But you don't build for that unless you get an indication of what's coming. So I guess you get the answer. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say, obviously, yeah, for us, air access has been key in the Western Cape, and that's driving a lot of the conversation at the moment. And hopefully that will lead to more infrastructure being built and being required, because you know, we reached 2019 and you know, AXA was going into a nice big infrastructure build for Cape Town, and unfortunately when COVID struck, that was put on hold now. But we're working very hard to bring that forward again by creating the demand. So yeah, I would say that, but I mean, it's not a negative thing, the policy and the bureaucracy. There is a lot of good things happening as well on that front. You know, in terms of visas as well, there's issues around that we need to solve. But you know, we're working closely with the government, and we're trying to solve these, you know, going hand in hand forward. So we'll keep on bringing the flights. AXA will, you know, bring the infrastructure. The government will assist with that, and the policy will follow.
Thank you, David. What we will do at the end just now is we give the panelists opportunity for closing remarks. So bear that in mind. So here's a question.
I'm Trudy Sebastian, and I'm from the South African Civil Aviation Authority. And my question or my comment is, in terms of what I received from David's presentation, in terms of the strengths, we've also indicated, or he indicated in his presentation, about campaign. So my question is, yes, we're looking at government, but how are we as different entities together in terms of making sure that we have a air carrier campaign in terms of our cargo terminal development or expansion at Cape Town International Airport? We need to take note that, yes, on the passenger side, we have many campaigns, but we sometimes lack in terms of having that being executed or even being implemented within the cargo and the cargo operators at the airport itself.
Thank you, Trudy. Guys want to respond?
I don't think it was a question, it was a comment. And I think I have to say spot on, and it's something that we've picked up as well. If you remember when I was presenting, I did mention some of the things that we plan to do just to, I think we call them operational efficiency initiatives. So yeah, it is being discussed. Yeah, it is in the plan. It is in the plan. In fact, we've reached a stage where we're trying to put it into the budget now. That's what thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Right, there's another question there. There's hands. We've got hands. Okay, let's start wrapping up. We're running out of time, but here we go.
Thank you, Mr. Ayuri. I've got a question to Mr. Farai. Yeah, okay, my name is Cousin Masunungure. Yeah, your cousin, yes. So I'm from Quality and Trading. We do sustainable packaging. So I've got a good question to Mr. Farai regarding sustainable air fuel. So you said you're going to create some like 3,500 jobs. Have you looked into sustainable energy of those trucks before you did the sustainable energy of the aviation?
Thank you. Interesting question. So the thing with petrochemical processes, right, where you say at your refineries, you don't only produce one product. So you produce a sweet product. So here I was highlighting the jet fuel fraction or the SAF volumes. You also produce renewable diesel. You also produce renewable petrol. You also produce renewable LPG. So those fractions are what we're making would be used for those trucks. So in the end, they would be using green fuels itself. And I talked about the hydrogen angle, so potentially that some of the green hydrogen would be diverted into green hydrogen trucks. And we've seen progress in this happening with some of the major platinum miners already demonstrating this in South Africa. Thanks.
Thank you very much for this opportunity for being here. I'm a member of SANWIT, representing the marine side for the sector from a SANWIT. I come from a very complicated sector that is we call the small scale fishing sector. I'm representing the small scale fishers of the Western Cape as a leader coming from a community-based organization. My question is to John Black. John Black. When I came in, he said his name was John Black. So I thought his name was really John Black. So my question is to you, man.
We need some context there.
So when I came in, and I noted that Westkro was the one also driving this initiative. Many years back, I can't remember when. Then we had engagement with Westkro regarding the small scale fishing sector. So now we are jumping into an era that I think everybody's eyes on now at the moment in South Africa for ocean economy, the blue economy and all that other MSP, everything happening. Now we are using the marine for transport, we are using the land transport, and now we want to patch into the aviation. The reason therefore is he mentioned earlier on that the fish get imported into South Africa, but we got a wide coastline. So there's certain things that we as small scale fishers get exported into by the fish going first out and it comes back to South Africa. So we really don't know if it's really happening. So we want to export our traditional line fish that consists of different fishing and especially the snook. We want to transport it out of the country. Also our Western Cape rock lobster, we want to send it out ourselves with the aviation.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great question and difficult to answer, but yes. No, I think, and that's what we're trying to create through the conversation about air cargo. Is currently that the big players don't struggle that much when exporting their products, but the small players have a very difficult time, and that's why we're trying to create this, perishables hub or perishable center, where small scale farmers or small scale fisheries can also bring their products, and they can have similar competitive marketplace where they can bring their products and it can be exported. So this is in our long-term, goals that we can create that opportunity for small-scale companies to also partake in the economy and export the product. So it's not happening currently, and it is very difficult. There's a few big companies that rule the roost, and we'll try and change that going into the future. So sorry for not giving a more definitive answer, but that's what I can say.
Thank you, David. As I was saying, he wants to expand.
Thanks, Harry. I just wanted to expand on what Anton said earlier in response to the gentleman that asked about single window and the AO program. So firstly, single window has been spoken about for a long time, okay, and it's going to be spoken of in the next while. But with the introduction of the Border Management Agency, which is going to be coming through in next year, single window has almost like taken a back seat in that space. Whilst we are pushing for single window, the Border Management Agency is probably going to be, if one could put it, I wouldn't say counterproductive for that, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that whole space with the Border Management Agency. Don't forget now, the Border Management Agency is going to certainly take up all the spaces now that's currently with SARS and all the other border agencies, the police, SAPS, and so forth and so forth. And then in terms of the AO program, SARS there is a lot of work being, and you're correct, a huge amount of work. The focus at the moment is on SMMEs and the onboarding of SMMEs to the AO program. And some may say it is relatively moving all right, but in my opinion, it's not. The uptake is very slow in terms of onboarding of SMMEs to the AO program. So SARF in collaboration with SARS, we are currently instrumental in setting up pilots, which is going to be announced soon for the AO program. And then from there, it will probably run smoother, and I think we will probably have more visibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Basil. Appreciate that. Right, we've got one question left here. Henk Neetling, he's saying, it seems like there isn't much data available on air cargo volumes. Specifically, this aggregated by origin and location and commodity detail, particularly domestically, as David mentioned. What does the panel think is the best way to bridge this knowledge gap moving forward? Are the volumes just so low that they aren't captured to that detail, or is data lost somewhere?
I'll answer half, and then David, whatever I leave behind.
Thank you, Lisa.
I think it's more collaboration, to be honest, and it's part, actually, when you talked about closing remarks, it's part of what I would say. We need to get to a point in our relationship with the cargo operators and everyone involved where we can have transparency and just share information. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, I'll also use it as my closing remarks. We speed this along. Everyone wants some lunch. So. Yeah, I mean, internationally, we've breached that gap now. We've got a good data source that we're using. There's relatively a lot of data available internationally in terms of value and volume. So we're using that a lot. But on the domestic front, there's a big gap, and I think it's also about competitive advantage because people don't want to share their. And yeah, I think that's exactly what the comment on the question was. Is I think it's such a small market that if you divulge some of that information, you'll know where it comes from. So domestically, we need to grow that, but I mean, there's ways that we can work on this. So yeah, for us, it's just about creating this awareness, about promoting the air cargo agenda in the province, make sure that everyone's included, And Westgro's ultimate aim is economic, job creation and competitiveness. So, I want to just, Farai, thanks for your presentation. I was really inspired. It made me actually want to quit my job and go and cut down trees. But maybe as part of your closing remarks, a question for you would be, is there government buy-in, or on what level is the government buy-in currently? Because I would like to open a production facility for SAF, but I don't have the money. So where would the PPP come from?
Thank you, David. So closing remarks to Farai.
Thanks for that question, Dave. And I think, that's one of the things that's lacking in terms of government buy-in, and why it's important that, we're presenting this work in front of stakeholders like this, whereby kind of a group of concerned stakeholders will rally behind this to push this forward. We've seen what's driving SAF globally. As I mentioned before, the EU with kind of like a carrot, a stick with the EU blending mandate pushing it. The US more recently with like credits for SAF. So that is definitely something that's missing. The only there's only one document that mentions SAF in South Africa, but not to detail. So there's definitely more that needs to be worked in terms of government getting on board. But I think the critical thing is, this sustainability issues are coming thick and fast for tourism, as I mentioned before, and also just for that trade and all these goods that we want to send out there. So we really need to get ahead of this and to move forward. The 2016 pilot that I was talking about, AXA was involved in that. We've shown that we can do it. So and that landscape has changed back then because no one was talking more about it, and things have suddenly moved. So it's time that we look at it again, and we make this the most of this opportunity and position ourselves as leaders, as leaders in this, not only in Africa but globally as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Farai. Much appreciated. Let's have Anton's closing remarks.
Thank you. So I'll double back to the one question that the gentleman online asked around what comes first, the airports, the air access, or the trade facilitation. And I'm going to wear my trade hat here and say that I think that the trade facilitation aspect is so important because we can drop duties, to zero, but ultimately I think, and we can have airports and air access, but if we get our cargo there and get stuck on the other side for weeks on end because of an obscure rule or requirement that we weren't aware of, I think that's really hampers any of these initiatives. So I think it's really important that those trade facilitation processes are put in place that make cargo move freely and quickly through the process. Are put in place, and I don't think big agreements like AFTA are necessarily a requirement to make that happen. I think that government authorities can do that in their own individual capacities, and I think that would go a long way to helping pull the air industry, and it's not just the air industry, it's the road and the air, sea, and everything else with it. So that would be my closing remark. Thank you.
Thank you, Anton. Much appreciated. Ladies and gents, let's give our panel a hand. All right. David was actually wrong. He said everybody's looking forward to lunch. Everybody's looking forward to the lucky draw. That's actually first priority. So let's do the draw then. Right. So I'm going to ask David from Westgro to do the draw. So David, if you can sit, that we can have you nicely in the camera. Yeah, and then we're going to ask David to do a draw. The first draw is here for this.
So this is the same the presenters got. There's a nice bottle of wine, few Westgro goodies, some earpods, which is always nice. And what else? Yeah, that's about it. Anyway. Light entry.
Okay, so juggle around that cards first. Yeah, do this and do that. All right. All right, so you need whoever's the winner must be present.
The first winner is Nyameku Duku.
Person here, there we go. Come and pet you. Right, so David will do the next draw for us. The next draw is for this Biltong King.
Shabit Jacobs.
There you go. Come and get your prize.
Are you a biltong maker?
Congratulations on that one. Ladies and gents, yeah, that's bringing us to the end of this great event, hosted by Cape Town Air Access, Division of Westgrow. Thank you very much for being here. And thank you, Westgrow, Cape Town Air Access, for hosting us. Ladies and gents, apparently when you exit the room, you turn left there at the stairs going down. Just at the stairs, there's a restaurant area where they're going to serve lunch. So please do some networking, enjoy you there yourselves. Our next event from a transport forum is next Thursday in Sandton. It's the Transport Month event. It's a big event. We've got high-level speakers again. Opening address is Jack van der Merwe, the head of the Gauteng Transport Authority, previously the head of Gautrain. He's doing the opening address and a lot of other high-level presenters. There's going to be exhibitions. It's also a hybrid event, so you're welcome to join via Zoom or YouTube. I hope we see a lot of you there. Looking forward to that. So thank you very much for being here. We're saying goodbye to the guys on Zoom and YouTube. We're going to end the online session now, but the rest of you in person here, you're welcome to enjoy lunch with us. So thank you again and take care.